$2 phantom glue.
Oh God, I know.
So proud.
My mom would make elaborate ones forgetting that she was just like scroll 2 miles. I was forgetting the entire one, and everyone fell out. And it was the tattered. Yeah, but it was
It's a thought that counts. Yeah. Family.
We have a whole audience here tonight.
Always good chat support.
Kind of a big deal.
It is.
Wow, I'm a little bit of a big deal.
You are.
I'm not a very creative costume designer, so also this Halloween weekend I'm part of a wedding, so I'll be grooming for Halloween. No.
You don't know.
Yeah, no, they're not like that. They just picked it because it was soon and it was cheap, but they've had multiple questions like, oh yes, you're having a theme wedding? Be like, if anyone else is that.
So I think that
You're invited.
1 year. And I just got
That's awesome. That's fun. I'm not very good at costumes, so I never make a big deal. I don't really make a big deal, but yeah. Sorry, I'm boring.
A giant.
Yeah, no, but
Not creative like that.
nothing wrong with that.
Thank you, Al.
are we supposed to take
Might be from last week.
it's from my people last year. I like the designs. I know we are.
It's fine. Just cards in terms of ways to stake it out. Steve can pass them out. Sure.
Yes, yes, yes. Give it a second. What message meeting?
I think Dr. Rogers can X that out.
Oh,
She's
okay. I just didn't want to.
working behind the scenes.
Okay. I didn't want to start if it was gonna mess us up. Everybody else set?
Yes.
Time being 7:02, I call to order the October 11th Franklin School Committee meeting. Meetings are recorded by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29, as well as recorded by Franklin Matters. Any individual who also wishes to record this meeting must notify the chair in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20F. All right, moving on to our Pledge of Allegiance students. We have with us here Jacob and Madeline. If you guys wanted to come up to the microphone. So we have two of our seniors here from the FHS Peer Leaders Club. The Franklin High School peer leaders are a group of compassionate and responsible students who choose to lead by example. In this role, students choose to abstain from dangerous substances and take on many important roles in the school. The leaders not only help ease the transition of underclassmen or new students, but they also volunteer over the summer at the high school orientation and at every open house parent night that Franklin High School offers. The peer leaders also facilitate many school and community programs. Peer leaders demonstrate their care and compassion for others throughout the year. Jacob and Madeline, along with their classmates, have set the successful tone that the beginning of the year has been. The climate of a school is directly connected with the senior class. FHS is lucky to have a tremendous collection of students who are interested in making our school a better place every single day. So Jacob and Madeline, if you wanted to lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as is customary, we will now pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. Review of agenda. Agenda looks okay to everybody?
Yes.
Yep. I'm sorry, I forgot we have a remote participant, so I need to take a roll call vote for this evening's meeting. Camille Bernstein?
Here.
David Callahan?
Here.
Al Charles?
Here.
Dave McNeil?
Here.
Elise Stokes?
Here.
Megan Whitmore?
Here.
Denise Spencer here. Okay. Thank you. All right, sorry about that. Payment of bills taken care of. Payroll, Ms. Stokes? Payroll's in order. All right. Moving on to our FHS student reps. You guys want to go ahead?
Perfect. Hi, my name is Shaw Downing. I'm the Vice President of the class of 2023, and I'm going to update you on sports to start. Last Friday, the football team had a statement win at Taunton with a score of 35-14. The boys soccer took a big win, 3-0 on Monday in their game against Havarian. Full slate of games today. We had field hockey, volleyball, soccer. Our gold medal unified basketball team won in North Attleboro today. The golf team faced off against Taunton today at home and won. Both boys and girls cross country won their meet in North Attleboro. Our field hockey team played in Stoughton today and won 13-0. The girls soccer team played at Newton South High School today. Finally, good luck to our volleyball team who is playing in Stoughton at the moment. The class of 2024 updates are that the PSAT is coming up on October 15th, which is this Saturday. They have started their prom committee meetings every other Friday morning. Their prom date is set for May 5th, 2023 at Lombardo's in Randolph, where past classes have held their prom. They will roll out their first fundraiser for this year soon to raise money for their prom.
Hi, I'm Robin Chaudhary, the class 2023 president. To start with some class 2023 specific updates, senior quotes for the yearbook are due October 31st. As for our first banquet, which seems weird in our final year of high school, that is going to be on Thursday, April 6th at Lake Pearl. And we won't have school the next day due to Good Friday. We are organizing our raffle calendar fundraiser again this year, and we'll be collecting prizes for the calendar from local businesses. So if you would like to donate something or know anyone that would like to, you can contact our advisors, John Layton, Beth Ann Curtis, or anyone in the administration at Franklin High School. Other than that, just many kids are applying to colleges right now. We have early deadlines approaching the first week of November. Other than that, the seniors are rather quiet right now. As for whole school updates, Diversity Awareness Club is currently holding its first event of the year, their Sweet and Greet, where attendees are able to try different desserts from around the world while students share information about their cultures and the diverse community at Franklin High School. The Franklin High School Theater Company is currently working on Cinderella, and their performances will be on November 11th, 12th, 18th, and 19th. Ski club signups are open now. Kids will be selected on a first come, first served basis, and there will be trips to Wachusett every Tuesday after school. Parent conferences will take place on November 9th in person in the afternoon and evening, and November 10th will be virtual only. And the FHS Academic Learning Center is open in room 242 on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 2:15 to 3:45 for anyone looking for help with homework or projects or anything else. And lastly, our homecoming game is on Friday, October 21st at 7 p.m. The football team will be hosting Attleboro. At halftime, we'll do our tradition of a parade with different floats for every class. And then the dance will be the next day on Saturday, October 22nd from 7 to 10 p.m. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
I want to go to the suite and meet.
You can find more information on their Twitter.
Thank you, Denise.
All right. I think that's it. You guys can get out of here.
Thank
Go get
you.
some ice cream. Mr. Jagier, Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. Just before I begin, Robin had family visiting from out of town, and they're here to support Robin. And I just wanted to say he's a tremendous young man, and we're lucky to have him here to report. But we're really lucky to have him in town and here as a Franklin High student. Shaw, I would not want to leave you out. You are tremendous as well. I know your parents are aware and your family. But, okay, so thank you for being here and for supporting your son and your family member.
Oh, that's sweet.
So for the report, on Friday, October 7th, the Franklin PS staff participated in Early Release Professional Development Day. Our pre-K teachers began a course on multi-tiered systems of support through partnership with Project Aspire, which is basically a parental engagement program, which the staff worked together and continued their coursework. Some also continued safety care training as an approach to the support. For our elementary and middle schools, the staff worked within their buildings to examine student data and calibrate effective approaches to supporting student growth through goal setting. At the high school, high school teachers participated in department-guided professional development to support curriculum alignment and implementation. So we're currently preparing for a full Professional Development Day on November 8th. The morning of November 8th, we'll kick off our 2-year pre-K through 5 Science of Reading PD, while secondary level will focus on building-based initiatives. Last year, the feedback on the full day PD from teachers was positive regarding the opportunities to collaborate on district, school, and team initiatives. And as such, the afternoon will focus on offering a menu of choices. The Office of Teaching and Learning sent out requests for proposals to all educators similar to what we did last year. And they've asked to consider 3 types of sessions: present an idea or strategy to colleagues, facilitate a roundtable discussion on a topic related to teaching, or lead a collaborative planning session on a variety of initiatives. And we're excited to report that we've already received over 70 responses from teachers within the district. Sessions led by colleagues, school, district administrators, and outside providers will be available on that day. Late buses. After school clubs and activities began at the middle and high school last week. Late buses began operating. We were able to staff 4 late buses versus 5 in prior years. General routes are posted on the transportation website, but bus stops vary depending on who's actually riding on any given day for an after-school club or activity. So students might not be dropped off at their regular bus stop, but they should be within a half mile of their home at any point in walking distance. Routes started later than anticipated and have taken longer this past week. We are working with Holmes Bus Company to make adjustments and reduce the time students spend on the bus, and they are also trying to get buses to schools earlier. We encourage parents to review the late bus routes with students so that each student knows which bus to take and which stop to get off. And if you have questions, you can reach out. I would check the website first for the PDF that's available. It's on the left-hand column of the transportation tab, but also you could email schoolbus@franklinps.net if you had any specific questions that we can help with. We're happy to help. As follow-up to last meeting's citizens' comments regarding opting out as part of the curriculum, the Mass General Law 71, Section 32A was referenced. I just wanted to take an opportunity to clarify regarding that law. Massachusetts General Law 71, Section 32A affords parents and guardians the flexibility to exempt their children from curriculum which primarily involves human sexual education without penalty. In accordance with that law, the Franklin School Committee, you have a policy that was adopted which outlines the parental notification relative to the sexual education. Each school year, the district notifies parents and guardians and provides a description of the human growth and development sexuality curriculum that's covered. The notice includes their right to exempt their child from any portion of the the human development curriculum, and a right to review instructional materials to the extent practicable upon written request to the principal. For example, if you have an elementary student, you may recall a letter that's sent out which outlines the curriculum topics. It also has some curriculum information that can be reviewed. And at the middle and high school, you can also expect more information notification. It's also in the handbook for high school and other levels. Each school year, let's see. So the opt-out law focuses on the course curriculum, which primarily involves human sexual education and sexuality. As defined, it talks about curriculum that involves human sexual education and human sexuality issues. And it's really the instruction materials that focus principally on human development and biological processes for human reproduction and sexual development. Aspects of the curriculum which are not primarily involved in such matters are not included in that opt-out pursuant to that Mass General Law that was cited, which is 7132A. Mass law does not prohibit instruction in a curriculum such as English, history, or science where themes related to human sexuality are embedded in course materials, but not the course's primary subject. In Franklin Public Schools, work related to themes of belonging, identity, and equitable access of student are not included in that opt-out. There's no opt-out for the theme of belonging within the schools. The last update I have for you is related to staffing. We've been providing staffing updates since August, and today we have one teacher vacancy remaining on the list with a pending position of a new hire for our science teacher at the high school. And we've communicated with the families regarding that for the high school science teacher, and we'll continue to try to fill all of our positions, as we've said. And we are down from 13 support positions like ESPs to 11 currently. So we continue to advertise. We've refreshed multiple times to make sure we're at the top of the queue. We've reached out through other networks as well, and we'll continue to try to hire and fill every position that we can. And that concludes my report for the evening. I'll take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jagier.
Sure.
Camille?
I just want to clarify, the one teacher vacancy is the one that's pending, or there's one and then there's one pending?
There's one vacancy and there's a pending teacher position that we're a science teacher that we are in the employment components, so just meeting the stipulations of our employment. We anticipate having one vacancy remaining at an elementary for a special education position.
So I had a question about, because I had a parent call about the science position, concerned that, and I'm reporting here and then trying to just get information.
Sure.
That the student, this is the quote from the parent, wasn't being taught physics at all for 21 days. So I just wanted to,
Sure.
I don't know how it's handled, if other teachers, like, is it a building sub, a regular sub, other science teachers fill in? So that parent was pretty concerned that their student was, in her words, doing nothing for 21 days. So I just wanted to ask about that.
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy to answer that. And I also have our principal, Joshua Hanna, here today, who can come up and also speak to this. But, and Josh, you can come up. But ultimately, we had the same adult in the room working within the science department and the course partners to provide students with the curriculum. We recognize that doesn't replace having a licensed teacher, and that's not ideal, and that's not a situation we wanted to be in, and certainly weren't. We were actively seeking, and we hope that we have a resolution in the next day. But understand the frustration from families, but the adult that we put in the room had a high care level for students, worked within the department to make sure that the information that was being taught and conveyed to the students in that room was consistent with what other students would be experiencing, so that it wasn't different. Like I said, I'll let Josh fill in a couple of the pieces, but that would be my overarching response.
Sure. So when teachers unexpectedly aren't here, we obviously have substitutes for them. And then we're in a process of hiring highly qualified people with that content expertise and background. And that's where we've been the last month for this particular role. The physics certification obviously is a unique one. And there aren't a lot of human beings, frankly, that have that background and are interested in doing this work. And so it made our job of finding a reasonable replacement who not only had the background of being an educator or want to work in high school, but also the content expertise to be able to actually teach what it is that the students were learning. So we did have work for students to do, but we did not have a human that was at that level of expertise to teach it in a way that we would be, used to or comfortable with. And, at this point, we're closing in on having that fit. So that's a positive. We did have some opportunities to invest in some online learning platforms, but being completely honest, most of those aren't anywhere near the experience of having a teacher in the room. And so when it came down to monies and time in terms of where to spend your investment, we were really trying to recruit and find someone that would be able to meet the students' needs long term. And so all that said, that's where we've been the last few weeks, and I've been in communication with families as frequently as possible and recognize and understand their frustration. I certainly don't dispute it. I share it. And as does our administration and school. And we dealt with a situation that was unexpected. And I think those things unfortunately happen. And, being totally honest regarding the state of public education in this country, with the number of people that have decided to find paths to make employment in other ways, I think we're really lucky as a district. We only have one opening at this point. I think if you look at a lot of other districts around the state, that number is a lot higher. So not making excuses, just being honest.
Right.
I had a thought. Can I come back to it? I just had a question. Now I can't remember the question.
Okay.
Dave Callahan.
Thank you very much for the update, both the overall superintendents and also drilling down on the staffing issue. One thing, actually, I wanted to two questions about one subject. We talked about the late bus. Mm-hmm. So you said brought down from 4, it was originally 5, brought down to 4, is that correct?
Correct.
Is that due to budgetary reasons or just a need?
It's a staffing issue. The driver, they don't have drivers to staff five late buses, so we consolidated to 4 at this point.
And again, just to kind of reiterate, because we're talking about staffing, when it comes to the staffing of the school bus drivers, that's something that's a contract that
Correct.
We're going out to. That's not an employee of the Franklin Public School System. But
the bus company hires
That's correct.
All right, thank you very much for that. And also on that note with the busing too, this is something I had recently read an article that was talking about school bus transportation and kind of linked to the cost of fuel. So at least there's one article that was kind of talking about it, saying that a lot of times the contracts that we kind of currently have a cap on the fuel rate. So even though the cost of fuel is going up, that we're kind of kept our cap is down, so that way it doesn't kind of impact our budget too much. Is that where we stand?
Yeah, we do have a fuel escalation clause in our contract that has that similar cap in terms of how much over and what payments might need to be made depending on the price of fuel. So yeah, we do have that type of a clause.
Okay.
It doesn't cap it off, but it does allow for the vendor to be able to recoup some of the costs of the fuel, which we don't know where that's going to go, but it is coming down.
No, absolutely. But yeah, just so it's it shouldn't be a major surprise.
Correct.
Coming on down the line that we've allocated this much and it's actually going to be this much.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No questions today.
I just want to say thank you very much for this update. The recent PD day, it's great to, because we hear so much about the multi-tiered systems support and the data-driven decision-making. So it's great to hear that's being implemented already into our procedures and the day-to-day. And thank you as well for the clarification on the opt-out portion of the curriculum, because it's important to have correct information out there. So thank you.
Elise?
I guess I just want to validate the critical need for staff in all districts in the state of Massachusetts. And it's really tough and really scary in some places. And I think, the administration here, you're doing the best you can, and you need to fill the physics position with a physics teacher. You can't just take a biology teacher and put them in there for a full year. And so you need to take the time and be thorough in the process as far as hiring. And so I know I wish that they were hired in August too. Everybody does, but I know that you're going through the process that you need to go through to get a person in there that would be able to deliver the curriculum and in the expert way that physics needs to be delivered. So I appreciate that. Just a question, how long on the late buses, how long are kids on the late buses? Like some of the complaints you're getting, I'm sure you're getting some, what's long?
Yeah, so first they're arriving to the school later than they typically should. So they should be arriving to the school in the 3 to 3:15 range.
Oh, so the buses aren't even picking the
That's
kids.
one
I
piece,
see.
right?
Okay.
So some of them are not getting to the school until 3:30, and in some cases 3:45. So we're working on that shift in that schedule. Additionally, not knowing the number of kids who are going to ride on a given day and putting the route together at that moment. Mm-hmm. That's what drivers are doing. Some students were, in fact, getting home 5 o'clock, just before 5 o'clock, which that's not ideal. And we are working on getting that schedule down so that students aren't on the bus for that long period of time. So it's something we're aware of. I'm sorry for families because I don't want to see students spend that much time on a late bus to try to get home. I want to encourage kids to participate in after school activities and clubs, and I want to be able to get them home safely and in a timely fashion. So we are definitely working on trying to get those buses there to the schools earlier and getting them home earlier as well.
Yeah, so if the clubs are ending at 3 and the buses aren't even showing up to pick the kids up till 3:30, 3:45, and then that's a drain on whatever the building-based staff that's waiting around outside with the kids, because you're not just going to go home or go into your office and do work when their kids still there waiting. So they must have to be supervised in some way because they're middle schoolers. And yikes. Okay.
Right. And part of that is logistical because our elementary is let out at 2:45. Mm-hmm. So if hypothetically, if those buses are leaving the elementary at 2:55 in a 10-minute roughly dismissal period, there's a Keller bus leaving at 2:55 is not likely to be back at Annie Sullivan at 3 o'clock.
No. Right.
So we're working on some of those logistics and we're aware of that. And
wow. Well, more power to you. I'm not a job I would want necessarily because the numbers aren't making any sense. But keep us posted on that.
Megan?
Yeah, thank you for the update. And yeah, we understand you're working hard on trying to fill these positions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Moving right along.
Yes, I remember now.
You remember now?
I truly have COVID.
Okay, go ahead.
And it's a real thing. So I guess the difficulty too is like my audience is both parents and also asking you. And I want to second what Elise had said, that positions all over the state, all over the United States. And it's not shocking given the treatment the teachers have been under the last several years, that we are finding more and more difficulties. And I worry that this will continue to be worse. And notoriously, science positions are some of the hardest to fill. And physics, of all of them, the hardest to fill. And it's not, I'm an English teacher, but I can be pulled to teach American Lit. I've taught every grade and almost every level. But biology, as you said, biology teachers just can't jump over and teach physics. It also depends too on how the school is set up. I myself was out for the first 12 days of this school year with pneumonia, and it was horrendous thinking that the kids would start the school year without me. However, because of how our duties are, teachers have a sub duty and they're pulled into that classroom. It's not a substitute teacher, but it's also one of my colleagues could teach my class, but they might be teaching seniors, and English is a little bit different than teaching physics. So and also I was at home, even though I was sick, I could make the lesson plans and even record videos for the kids, although I couldn't be in school. So it's not, I want to support that the school was doing the best they could, but also I'd like to encourage, and this is where it's difficult for me because I'm a school committee member. My role is not to tell the principal how to run a school. But I would, like as the year goes on, particularly since I'm scared we're going to face this kind of thing again, if there could be ways to be creative or think outside the box. I don't even want to bring this up right now because we have plenty of business to work on, but to think outside the box of ways that kids and parents could understand, both understand through messaging, but also find creative ways for kids to receive instruction that might translate from the student to the parent as more than not doing anything. I have children, I have students that report home, and I'm not suggesting this. The kids weren't reporting accurately, but all of us know the idea that you were doing absolutely nothing versus having a sub who had work for them is quite different. I mean, I've given sub work and I have given work and then it's not done the next day and I'm frustrated. So I hope you understand I'm like struggling here with my role as a school committee member, but also trying to respond to parent concerns. So I appreciate your answering my questions and for being patient with my just blanking out like a cow in the headlights. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving along to guest presentations. Mr. Jakir, if you don't mind, if I went ahead and teed up the first one. Okay. All right. Our first guest presentation this evening is an acknowledgement of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees Legislator of the Year, Senator Becca Rausch. If you wouldn't mind coming out to the microphone. So this award is to recognize state legislators who have a strong commitment to advancing public and mental health supports for students. As Franklin is one of the many communities you represent, we were lucky to be chosen to host this recognition of you. Since being elected, you have fought for our students and their families, been a champion of mental health supports, worked tirelessly for your districts, and we are very grateful for your hard work. I would like to congratulate you, Senator Rausch, on behalf of the entire Franklin School Committee for being selected for this award. Here to present the award is Massachusetts Association of School Committees Executive Director, Glenn Kuchar, and the current Treasurer Secretary of MASC, Jason Frazier.
You said any better than you just stated. The advocacy that Senator Rush puts forth on behalf of children and family in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, focusing on their health, is extraordinary. But the work that's being done on mental health in the state and the desperate need we have for more access to mental health facilities and resources, there's light at the end of the tunnel with the work that Senator Rush is doing for that. So on behalf of the Mass Association of School Committees, I'd like to present you with the Legislator of the Year Award. Congratulations.
so much. It's such I'm so truly grateful and deeply honored, and particularly honored to be receiving this award here in Franklin for so many reasons. You know, schools are vital to the fabric of our communities, right? Educating our next generations, social emotional growth, as we've heard now a couple of times, right? Even combating food insecurity and connecting families with sorely needed resources, bringing communities together in so many different ways. I personally am a product of public schools. I'm a proud parent of 2 public school children. And so I really know firsthand in so many different ways. My father was a public school teacher and worked for state education where I grew up, and you know, public schools are so vitally important. And we've done some really tremendous work, in particular, just in our neighbor to the south in the town of Rentham, securing sufficient funding for that town to finally implement tuition-free full-day kindergarten for every single family in that town, which had never happened before this year, and securing and creating and securing full funding for the first ever state-sponsored youth mental health support text line. It's called Hey Sam. If you're a student and you're listening, you can text it right now, and there will be a young person on the other line waiting to listen, judgment-free. We've hosted youth legislative forums for folks like Shaw and Raven and other folks who have zoomed in from all across the district, and it's been a tremendous success in so many different ways. And in particular, again, it's such an honor to receive this award here in Franklin tonight, right? The birthplace of Horace Mann, the founder, arguably easily, of universal public education, and in a community that's so deeply dedicated to supporting young people and particularly bringing inclusion and equity into the work that all of you do on the school committee, that all of you do at the state level, and that all of us try to be the best partners we can be at the state level. So again, thank you so much, both to the State Association of School Committees and to the Franklin School Committee for hosting us this evening. It's a deep, deep honor. Thank you so much. I just want to call just a quick 5-minute recess and we will be back. You guys All right. I'll check it back on. Give it a sec. All right. Everybody's all set?
Wonderful.
Yes. I call the meeting back to order. Mr. Jakir, the floor is yours for the next presentation.
Okay. As you know, I can stay here with cameras and people can see. I don't need to move anymore. As you know, last meeting, first off, on September 13th, we did a digital learning update with the plan. And then we talked about a series of plans that would come before you regarding school improvement from all levels. Last meeting on September 27th, we had ECDC and the elementary principals come to present their school improvement plans. And as part of this kind of school improvement series, tonight, I'm excited to share that our middle and high school administrators are here to share their school improvement plans for you. And then in October, we'll have a DEI presentation as well as part of that, rounding off all the plans for the year so that you have the opportunity and the community has the opportunity to hear about the exciting things that are happening, what we're planning. I appreciate Mr. McNeil mentioned that some of the PD that we've referenced over time has included some of these ideas and goals, and that's been the idea is around synergy and alignment and systems, making sure that they align. So with that said, we're going to start with our middle school SIPs. So once again, aligning our systems, right? We try to align what do we value in our core values, what's our vision for students, and that really comes into play with the portrait of a graduate. So you'll notice the SIPs this year include folks responsible for the work, the goals that we hope to achieve, and some outcomes that we anticipate will happen. And I think that will make it logical at the end of the year when we report out on how we did and what goals we met and what areas do we need to continue and kind of move forward with. So with all of that said, I'm going to use the same example that I used last meeting because I just thought it was just remarkable about the work that our team did. So the day after school ended, our admin team came together upstairs in the training room to meet to plan the next school year. And I'll reference again, if anyone remembers this, Emmett Smith, it was a Nike commercial.
Oh my gosh.
And he had just won the Super Bowl. I'm going to use it again. I have to.
God.
Because folks may not have seen it online last time. But ultimately, he's doing his bench press, the next day. And they say, Emmett, are you ever going to take time off? You just won the Super Bowl. You were the MVP. And he wrapped it and said, I just did. And then they were back at it. And I use that example because the day after school got out, when principals have a ton and assistant principals have a ton that they want to do to wrap up the year. They were in a room upstairs planning and thinking about how we could move the work forward and not lose sight of what we experienced last year and collect and take all the things that we were trying to get better at and get a plan together and build working groups through the summer that met and come together in the retreat, as we mentioned in August. So I just would share that again as an intro to the work. And at this time, I'm excited to invite up our middle school administrators, Miss Lizzie Morrison from Manny Sullivan, principal, Miss Becky Motti, who is the principal at Horace Mann Middle School, and Mr. Craig Williams, the principal at Remington.
Good evening. I'm Becky Motti. I'm the principal at Horace Mann Middle School. Proud to be a part of this middle school admin team as well as our central office team. And I will kick off things by talking about strategic objective number 1, which is our social emotional well-being of both students and staff. We have a couple of different strategic objectives, and I will just highlight for information purposes and also just to provide an overview of the work that we're doing across the middle level. So the first is we hear the word or the acronym MTSS, multi-system tiers of support. And we are going to be looking at a tiered system for screening, monitoring, and communicating student progress towards SEL. It's important to do this for academic, but it's also important to do this for social emotional learning as well. One of the ways we are going to do this is through the adoption of a tool called Panorama. We've probably talked about it a little bit here in this venue. It's a data dashboard that we're working towards putting in place and having our administrators work and leadership teams work with it. It will track student data, and that will be social emotional learning data, but also things like attendance, behavior, as well as academic data eventually. We're really looking forward to the tools that it can provide for that social emotional learning. It will help us through surveys, but also through that collection of data to make sure that we can progress monitor, work with students, set goals, and then also track that data year to year. So it will be a tool that we'll be able to carry over, which we know is important as we do all of this hard work year to year. How do we make sure it carries over? The other initiative that we are working on is our advisory program. It's something that's been, I think, near and dear to the middle level for many years. We've had across the 3 middle schools an advisory program in some shape or form as long as I've been here, starting in 2003. We have had different variations of that. And one of the goals that we really had as far as a middle level admin team, as well as working with Josh at the high school level, is to really try to calibrate that, to create a more common vision for what advisory is, what we want it to be, what tools we would need to have in order to make that happen. And so we really put some thought into not only what we need to do as administrators, but really what our entire district needs to do with all of our staff. So this worked. Even starting with our negotiations team last spring, we worked really hard to really identify it as a part of the day in the secondary work day, because that was something that has really evolved into being a very important part of our of what we do. So right now, all of 3 middle schools have an advisory program that meets at the start of the school day for 20 minutes. It meets daily. Right now, we have a situation where the groups change year to year. So they will have a new group of students and a new advisory teacher year to year. And that's a model that you can use, as well as having that model of teachers and students carrying over year to year. But right now we're doing every year, we kind of reshuffle the advisory rosters. We have an advisory committee that is working towards making sure that some of the planning and some of the work that goes into what is covered in that time every day is supported by an advisory committee, so that the teachers have some of that information and some of that planning ahead of time. And really all of this is done to help us establish some of our goals for advisory, which again, through the work that we started in the summer with the advisory committee, is to help provide those meaningful connections for both students and staff, to directly teach SEL, social emotional learning skills, as well as our Portrait of a Graduate skills, to make sure that there's a common shared middle school experience. I think we all know that we can work more effectively when we're aligned, and when we make sure that we collectively bring the best of what all of our advisory work has been over the years together. And then also to really develop those compassionate citizens who can communicate effectively and also take an active role in their community. So second step is a research tool that the district has invested in, and we are going to use that as a foundation for our advisory program. And throughout the year, we are working with that advisory committee to conduct surveys and check-ins for students, so that there's a way to monitor how that's going. We also want to do that with staff, so we can get some feedback on how that program is working, and just continue to evolve it as needed. So looking at our one of our common goals, which is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and how we're going to make sure that that is something that we're working towards as well. We really have outlined some steps that we're taking to ensure that our practices when it comes to working with students is restorative in nature, that the work that we're doing is aligned with both the high school, middle school, and elementary school. So sharing that common vision, but then also taking into account the developmental stages of the students that we're working with. We really want to make sure that the practices that we're putting in place academically, behaviorally, through our different processes such as discipline and attendance really are taking into account everybody's identity and the differences that we might have, but also that we have a common goal of making sure that we have the most positive learning outcomes for students as well. Some of the things that we're doing that are really collectively aligned are educating students as part of the discipline process. So again, that restorative nature of what we're doing, making sure that we have some proactive as well as reactive measures, using things like a discipline matrix. I know the elementary school talked about that, just something that can be a tool we can really calibrate and make sure that the work we're doing is clear and consistent. And then one of the other highlights for the DEI work that we're doing is also continuing on with our resource group. That is something that was started in the spring of 2020, I believe. And we'll continue to work with Heidi Harris, our DEI director. That's really a group that comes together to discuss topics that affect students of marginalized groups. And it's something that our goal is to have that meet monthly and perhaps for that to start later this fall.
Thank you, Becky. I'm Lizzie Morrison. I'm the principal at Annie Sullivan Middle School. Do you want to stop for questions in between each one, or do you want us to go through all four? No, and then just go through the whole thing. Yeah. Okay. So I'll speak to the engaging and rigorous curriculum, and we just had a previous version up, so Tina's working on it. Becky, way to not skip a beat. Yeah. We realized that. So, moving along. One of the first goals is to have starting a full implementation of open SCIED curriculum in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So this curriculum follows a storyline focusing on an anchor phenomenon, which is just a shift in the current practices or what the teachers had previously used in the science classroom. So really focusing on establishing routines and questioning and using investigations. So this year, all teachers are teaching 2 units. 6th grade is focusing on light and sound, 7th grade on contact forces and thermal energy, and 8th grade on chemical reactions in matter and chemical reactions in energy. And I can say we all participated in some PD over the summer that was very exciting. I think there's a high level of enthusiasm in the classroom with teachers and students, which is great to see. The second goal that we're looking at is a more consistent Civics Project. The purpose of the whole Civics Project in 8th grade is to promote and enhance civic engagement. So first few years, the teachers made it work for them in their classroom, and now we're looking for more consistency, specifically with the action steps. So what's the outcome of the project? Are they writing letters? Are they looking to fundraise and donate to a charity? And just providing some guardrails for all of us so that the students are receiving similar answers when they ask to do one thing in one building and another thing in a different building. The next goal is to support our new roles as for Abby and Joe as middle school curriculum leaders, which is very exciting. We're doing walkthroughs with them. They're visiting building-based meetings, supporting new teachers, which is a great kind of first step for them to get in and really be a true coach for teachers who are new to our schools and the district. And we will be creating goals and identifying different benchmarks for success throughout the year as we learn more about what these roles could be. And then the fourth goal within this objective, am I on the right one? Okay. Really looking at the digital learning standards and focusing on embedding those standards across all content areas. This is a multi-year plan, just like with all standards that the state puts out. We really need to unpack them and figure out where they best live and who's responsible for all the standards. So this really is and should be a shared vision in collaboration with our DLIs, who are experts in this area, looking for just identifying who can own different standards, and repetition is okay. That will help the students to really personalize the standard. So an example is there's a safety and security standard where the students are asked to describe and use safe, appropriate, and responsible practices online. And I think all of us can hold that standard as we work with students as something that we own, whereas a computing devices standard where students are asked to describe a main function of an operating system that would live within just the computer classroom. So those are a few highlights in the curriculum area.
All right. And the third strategic objective, high quality instruction to meet the academic and SEL needs of each learner. We really anchor in the belief that all students are capable of learning at a high level. And that's really what this work is focusing on. And so really the first part of the strategic initiative 3A is going to be focused on training, not only the skills, but the mindset to be able to successfully implement a multi-tiered system of support, as well as that tier 1 instruction of universal design for learning. So we'll participate in ongoing administrative trainings with the work of Mirko Chardin, someone who is an author of Equity by Design and someone who's part of the Novak group. So we're excited for those opportunities. And with that, then be able to take that training, take that knowledge and understanding to train our staff throughout common PD experiences, and then build the skill set of teachers through those observations. That will be sort of the training. And while the training is occurring, I think we're going to be taking a deeper look at some of our practices that are already in place, ones that are aligned with a system of supports, and make sure that everything we're doing really works with that synergy that we've been talking about as a district for the past few years. The next piece of that in terms of 3B is really focusing on, there's the training piece, and then there's the actual use of data and establishing that data-driven culture in which we're going to be implementing consistent pre-K through 8. So working with our elementary schools with the screening tools and schedule by level, making sure that we have established data protocols in practice, and then sharing individual student assessment progress with our academic and multi-tiered system data teams for intervention planning. We're definitely in that process and utilizing, we're excited to be able to implement and utilize Panorama in order to be able to use that and serve as the warehouse for all of the data, both academic and social emotionally and behavioral, that we'll be collecting. And then use that data to not only just have the adults know of this is where you are, these are your strengths, but really be able to communicate and have it so that the students are aware and so that the students can take ownership over their next steps, where they're part of the decision-making process for their education.
All right, and that takes us to the fourth strategic objective, focusing on effective two-way communication to support students' learning. The first piece of that was strengthening community partnerships, and that's an ongoing. We are excited this year to add a social worker role to the middle level. And so part of her beginning in this role is identifying what resources are out there, what different supports. So looking at students with food insecurities or needing support, signing up for a sports team if they're looking for a scholarship. It really could be anything, and we have many students and families with different needs. So she's putting together a resource for all of our schools for then our counseling staff to be able to use to support the students. So that could be connecting with the food pantry, the Safe Coalition, the YMCA, DCF, just to learn about what's available at this time for our students and families. We also are excited to have dedicated EL teacher at our middle schools so that we can have them there to support the students in a more consistent manner. They're supporting us with quicker translation services and really advocating for the population of students that needs it the most and for their families. So they're joining team meetings and truly partnering with all of us at the building level to support these students.
And then the final goal that we have is to reinstitute student-led conferences at the middle level. It's something that I think we've all had experiences in our different roles here in Franklin. And with the addition of March conferences added to the calendar, it provides the prime opportunity to have the more traditional parent, guardian, teacher conferences in the fall, and then work with our students for them to be really an active part of understanding their progress, their areas of strength, their areas for growth, how to talk about that and the work that they've done over the year, and then be a part of those conversations when we have conferences in, I believe it's March. So our spring conferences. So that will definitely take some time. And again, this is an opportunity for us to take the different ways that we've approached student-led conferences across the 3 middle schools and really bring it together so that it can be more of a shared common experience for all middle school students.
All right, perfect. All right, so we'll take questions, comments. Camille?
I'm excited about student-led conferences. I'm sure my middle schooler will be excited.
Dave Callahan?
All right. Thank you all very much. I had a couple of questions. This one could be answered by anyone in terms of the panorama, and I apologize if this might have been addressed previously. We talked about it kind of tracking students along the way. How long will we be tracking that data for the students?
So it's a 6 through 12 initiative as far as having the student information, and it moves 6th grade through 12th grade.
And so when we kind of talk about it in terms of like behavioral SEL, one of the first things that kind of pop in my head, reliving my childhood. And I know I kind of had, like a couple of years that weren't the best. I'm going to blame external factors. I want to make sure that, like when we're kind of tracking a student, that something, that's happening outside the classroom, maybe 6th grade, isn't, it's more of a blip than necessarily a trend that's going to impact them in 7th, 8th, 9th, and so on and so forth. A lot of these apps, especially Panorama, love what we've been hearing about for the past couple of meetings with them, are fantastic. That's kind of what I'm sure everyone's kind of thought about this as well, but I just wanted to kind of throw that little bit of caution out.
That's just one, we've talked about that as well. And I think right now we do have access to all the different information. It's just in many different places. So we talk to the previous teachers, we look at the cumulative folders, we look at scores from a number of different, topics within the elementary. So now it's just all in one place. But we see that when we're looking back through student records of this may have been a challenging year for whatever reason, but it definitely doesn't leave a mark on the student as they grow up. I think we understand it's all about learning and moving on, not necessarily like identifying them as a challenge.
Dave, Scarlet Letter. Thank you. I can relate as a kid who I think I would have floated in and out of a variety of different areas as being, tier 2, meaning that I might have needed a little extra support. Maybe it was attendance one year or 1 month or one day. And then another day, it might have been my scores if we had state testing back when I was in school. But the idea is really students fluidly float in between a variety of areas. So what could be attendance in one moment, it gives us the opportunity to work. The focus is more on, we've noticed that there's an area where we need to help support a student further. And rather than look through 5 different databases, how are we able to readily use that information to help students and partner with families and say, hey, this is an area that we've noticed and this is our plan. Can we partner together to help your students? So I think flexibly, the spirit of multi-tiered systems of support is less about tracking and more about what does a student need in this moment that they deserve and should get as a support. And I think over time, if we see trends, it's really about how do we keep developing supports that allow all students to access and grow and develop. So it's a great consideration. I'm glad you brought it up, but certainly, that's how we would want to use a system like that.
Yeah, no, and thank you all for the clarifications. And 2 other notes too. One, talk about like the shared experiences through middle school. Like it's fantastic, and it's something too I hadn't really had spoken about when we talked at the elementary level either. But really kind of seeing these district improvement plans at each of the levels to kind of create that commonality really ensures a more equitable educational experience, kind of regardless of which school that you go into, and kind of having all of these shared, really like beacons are fantastic and incredibly important too. Is I know later on down the agenda, we're talking about redistricting. And it's going to be even more important to make sure that regardless of where your students are, that they're all kind of, having a lot of those shared common experiences. While obviously each school is going to have its own identity, and that's great, but that we're kind of looking for also in terms of the curriculum, more uniformity. And one last note, this is actually more, I meant to bring it up, the superintendent's report, but if I might ask a question, it reminded me when you talked about food insecurities. I believe an email had gone out talking about, it was an expansion of low-cost internet or electronics for individuals who are at free or reduced lunch levels. Would you just be able to, for those kind of listening at home, be able to kind of speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So families who are eligible and meet the criteria can fill out an application to apply for a reduced or discounted cost for internet access. I believe the cost through the providers that the state, I want to say the state is partnering with, they would provide the internet access to the family. I believe it's at $30 a month. And then the $30 a month would then be reimbursed back to the family as a discounted rate. So in essence, there's no cost. I'm actually not sure it's even, I think it's just a discounted rate. So it would be in essence, no cost to the family. So I don't even think the family has any cost for internet access as long as they meet the application guidelines. And so as long as they're eligible for free reduced meals, they would meet the guidelines. If they're collecting temporary aid to needy families or other income qualifying guidelines and meet those, then they would also qualify.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Apologize for going off course.
Yep. So I think as we mentioned before in other meetings, the middle level is critical in terms of growth and development and really setting themselves up for success in the future. Going from a more structured to more free flowing and allowing them that choice. So the work that you're doing here, I think really supports that. So thank you first and foremost. I know we've talked a lot about advisory. That was something that was big when we were doing the contract this year or the last year. Can you speak to the families in terms of like what exactly does advisory entail, and maybe give an example of what is covered like recently, so they get a sense of what's happening?
Sure. So advisory is a time where students come together with a smaller group. So where their classes might be 20 to 25, the advisory groups are 10 to 15 students with one advisory teacher. The planning document that we've come up is really taking into account feedback that we've gotten over the years from how we've implemented advisory in the past, where teachers want to be able to work with their students to come up with things that they want to do to build connections and to team build and to make sure that they have a connection with that adult that can carry them through. We sometimes have students go back to that same advisory teacher, even if they don't have that teacher anymore, because that connection is genuine. And so what we've done is structure about a week's worth of advisory activities to have some choice. And then what we've also done is decided that our social emotional learning is really important and critical, as well as putting some deliberate and intentional time into ensuring those portrait of a graduate skills are being worked on throughout the student's educational career. So a tool like Second Step or some lessons that we've created over time for different topics will also be a part of that advisory experience. So there's the common shared activities or lessons, if you will, of what everybody's receiving, as well as the advisory teacher's ability to, if a group likes trivia, there might be an opportunity to do that. We've had some walking clubs start because it's a group that needs to get energized in the morning. And so just different ways that groups can come together to make connections, to have some time that's for connecting and for also some education of some of those really important social emotional skills.
For example, one of our counselors in the last PD day were able to plan an entire week of coping skills lessons. And I'd be able to identify, okay, what's the stressor and what are your options when you're in a class in that moment to help you cope with the stress? I think is such a, I was reading over the presentation being like, I could use this stuff. This is great.
Can we use it tonight?
I might have a little bit. And so, you know, that type of skill building is something that our students might receive. The second step curriculum to start off focuses on growth mindset. And so helps students learn about growth mindset to be able to set goals for themselves for a span of time and identify possible obstacles for those goals and what they can do when those moments happen. So these are things that middle schoolers face on a day-to-day basis, and to be able to be equipped with this type of instruction is so valuable.
Yeah, agreed. I think these are things that you don't expect to be taught at school, things you learn through life. And if we can get some structure around it, and that sets them up for success, especially going into high school. And as you said, the coping mechanisms, I think we all need some of that sometimes. So great. So thank you there. One thing I was very impressed with last year was the civics presentations. I thought those were phenomenal, and I'm loving to see that there's alignment across the three schools this year as well. Is it too early to tell us like what the topic might be this year, or is that still kind of a work in progress?
So the 8th graders really select their topics based on what they're interested in. So the teachers will do some introductory lessons to get the students starting to think about how to be engaged in your community. So there's a variety of different topics. I think the goal is to continue, if you're selecting a topic that the students in the previous year have already started the work on, that they're kind of picking up where they left off and take it one step further. But I don't think we have an idea of what the presentation will be this year. Okay. Stay tuned.
Yes. And so can we get this earmarked for a future meeting at the end of the year?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And then around the communication, I'm a father of a Annie Sullivan Middle School student. So Lizzie, so thank you for being there. Just want to give you kudos for just the communication that you've done. It's exemplament. I can't say that word right now. It's phenomenal in terms of embodying what the goal is and making sure that folks are aware of what's going on and keep connected. I'm assuming all of the principals are doing the same thing as well. But I think that's key, keeping folks aware of what's happening so that you're not caught in the dark. You can have those conversations with your student, your child, and not be left, in the dark. And then the last one, to echo what my colleague had said around the student-led meetings. I think that's an awesome thing to do, in the sense that the student is no longer being a observer in these conversations. They're actively participating and really helping shape their future and really ask the right questions and set them up for success. So thank you for implementing that, and looking forward to see how that works this year. That's it.
David, yeah.
Thank you all for being here tonight for this presentation. It's great information, and the panorama tool, and being able to use that to create individualized SEL plans for students to track their progress and goal setting from middle through to high school. I think it's going to be a very useful and beneficial tool for students, teachers, and families. That's a really exciting prospect that we have here that's being implemented. So thank you for that. A couple questions. When it comes to the restorative practices that you mentioned that we aim for consistency with the other education levels, as well as both targeted methods that are tailored for this particular stage of student development. Could you maybe just expand upon that a little bit about how we both want consistency with the other levels as well as more age appropriate methods?
Sure. I think we take a shared approach in wanting to understand that any kind of behavior is communication for our students. So I think that is consistent across the levels, what they might be communicating, how they're communicating it, or how we can talk through and use things other than just maybe the traditional discipline practices or discipline procedures is where maybe it differs a little bit. I think that again, it's a shared vision across the middle schools to really educate our teachers that behavior is communication, and that students aren't perfect and will be making mistakes. It's actually part of the the journey of middle school is to figure that out. And so with that, I think we have a great staff that understands who middle school students are and what they need, but also we want to support as administrators that when those instances happen, that we're also looking to look at it as a teachable moment, look at it as an opportunity to revisit what happened or to restore those relationships or the whatever the circumstances might be, to restore their standing in the community really, and where they can also learn that they can make mistakes and then recover from them. And then I think just thinking about that being both proactive and reactive in how we put things and supports in place, knowing who our middle level learners are, but then also that they're all individuals, so they might respond differently, and we'll have to then individualize things as issues or different moments come up. I don't know if anybody
one of the things that we're putting into place is the shift away from that idea of like a traditional detention, but having actually renaming it and rebranding it in many ways and call it after school behavior support. And what that will look like is that we have a trusted adult there who's going to work with the student to help them reflect about why they're spending time with them, and then actually create an action plan for what's going to help that student restore the community that they've impacted in a way that's not the punitive, but also understands that a middle school student is going to need that guidance, is going to need some skill building to really help make things right. It's not going to be, oh, I'll apologize and it'll happen. They need that adult to model it for them.
Excellent. Thank you. No, that's very encouraging to hear. It's going to be extremely beneficial as this continues to develop. So thank you for that. And then one more question. When taking a look at the literacy plan review and that process, so what are maybe some of the areas of growth that we're seeing now that we're hoping to address with this plan development and assessment?
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was actually one of the goals that I forgot to mention before. I think the purpose of the review is really it's a best practice to regularly review the curriculum that we have in place. I was a part of the last English curriculum that was written in 2014. And that was a lot of hard work that poured into that. I think it was a 3-year process to finish those curriculum maps that were consistently implemented across all 3 middle schools. Since then, for many reasons, we've gone away from those. So it is time to kind of collectively look at what professional development has been offered, what resources are available, what texts are being used, what's the approach to keys to literacy is going to be a huge piece of it because of some common instructional practices that we are all using across content areas. So I think it's just about gathering information and then making the decisions as far as next steps go. And I don't have a good sense of next steps at this point. I think we're just in the very beginning of the review. Anything to add?
I think just to the idea as well of opportunities for what text students are reading. Are students able to see themselves in the text? Are they opening, the phrase of doors and windows, and making sure mirrors and windows. And so just making sure that opportunity is there with the curriculum that we're offering as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Elise?
Thanks so much for this. And I think that, we also read the high school plan in advance of this meeting. And so it's so nice we've got the ECDC and the elementary under our belt, and now we're talking about middle school, and we've sort of read the high school. So we can really see how this is going pre-K through 12 plus. And it's just exciting to see and be able to interact with you in each little segment. There's a lot of consistency sort of vertically. So from pre-K to 12 plus, and also just having the 3 of you here together, having all the elementary principals together. It's just looking at that sort of horizontal through the whole level. As Dave Callahan was saying, if we're looking at redistricting in the future, we are looking at redistricting in the future. And so when we're looking at redistricting, to know that no matter which middle school my kiddo goes to, it will be a similar experience, similar curriculums, similar social behavioral support, similar responses to things, similar proactive and reactive strategies, et cetera. And so I think that's a good feeling to have. And I think I just wanted to make a note about, I noticed when all three of you were speaking, if you said SEL, you said social emotional learning. And if you said MTSS, you said multi-tiered systems of supports. And if you said UDL, you said universal design for learning. And I think that that's really helpful. And I know those personally, but most people, in our audience, in our community, aren't necessarily teachers. And so I think it helps. It helps at least with the acronyms, but like any area, any sort of industry, education has their own educational jargon, and that's okay. And we're talking sort of in a group of people that is here to talk about schools and is focused on talking about schools. So it makes sense that we're using terminology that comes from sort of that educational jargon realm. But like if we think about the financial industry, which is not my area at all, like I need financial terminology for dummies, and still I need a lot of support with that. Or, the medical field has so much of their own terminology that I think is not accessible to me personally, because that's not my stuff. Or, technology, like when we had Tim Raposa in here and I was like, I need like a glossary and somebody to help me through this because I'm not understanding the words coming out of your mouth. And so I think that, you all did a really great job at breaking down the acronyms. And I think that's helpful for our community. And just to sort of like say that we are here to talk about schools and education. And so we're using terms that have to do with schools and education, and that's okay. And if people want more information, then, there's a lot of information on the website that's accessible. And, always going to the teacher or the principal if they have certain questions about what certain things mean. But thank you for your presentation. I think was very comprehensive and accessible. And I do have some questions. That's just a long intro. Okay, so I do appreciate it. Okay, so I think I agree with some others who had said the consistency with the Civics Project is exciting, and we can't wait to see those. That's always a highlight to get the kids in here. And what else? About Panorama. I think, so again, sort of looking at like the pre-K through 12 plus, like we heard about elementary using Panorama, and now hearing about middle school, there's a lot of similar themes, but I think the big difference that I heard having a middle schooler is that like the kids will be part of this. So the kids will be able, like a second grader isn't going to be looking at Panorama, but a seventh grader, they can look at this, and that's, maybe going to help some data-based planning as far as their student-led conferences or something. Like they're saying, these are my strengths, these are my areas to work on because I know it, because of, it's not just like how they feel in that moment, but it's based on sort of like this information that's been gathered. And that's just exciting for them to, I think, as far as like self-awareness goes, to be able to have that realistic awareness of strengths and areas of need based on evidence. Okay. I just have a lot written down. Oh, I think, Mr. Jaguar, you said something about the tiers in response to, I think it was Dave Callahan. So you were talking about how, and I think you made a good point, about, like when you were younger, you might have been sort of floating between tiers depending on high absences or maybe test scores here, or maybe a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
All of the above.
All of the above, right. And middle school, I think, right, is expected, as you say, it's sort of expected to be a little bit rocky and ups and downs. And I think Panorama is where you can sort of house all the information, because if a kid was just like a tier 2 kid, you sort of like pigeonhole them, and that's what they always get. And that's sort of like the point you're making. No, everybody's floating between all the tiers. Sometimes they might need more support in math for a couple months, and then you might not see them for years as far as math support. And so I think that's where it can get confusing though, because if you could just sort of stick kids in buckets and keep them there for 3 years, it would be much easier, right? Because you'd be like, okay, this kid always needs math support, this kid always needs behavior support, but they're not like that. So they're always constantly moving it. So to have something like Panorama that can track that and make sense of that is just, I think, absolutely worth the money. Okay, I do want to talk about movement break. I've been sent here by a 12-year-old, but I've heard things from other people too who are members in our community. And so I put a lot of importance in physical activity, just personally, but also as far as like learning goes. And I think that my understanding is that because of COVID, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because of COVID, there were mask breaks, and then we had mask breaks for kids who are outside, and then that sort of morphed into this outside time for middle schoolers. So then like the 6th graders coming in and the 7th graders who hadn't been in pre-COVID middle school thought like, oh, we get recess in middle school. And that's just how their grades work. And so, whereas the staff knew this was a temporary thing that we had to do because of COVID, and it's sort of become something else because it's in the schedule now. And so I guess I had heard, not just from the 12-year-old, but from adults also, that there was a lot of positive things about this, and that there was, there's sunshine and there's fresh air and they're yelling and getting their wiggles out and they're having social time that middle schoolers desperately need, and they're getting physical activity. And I heard a lot of benefits of it, and the research supporting physical activity in the classroom is really, really strong. So I guess I just wonder what happened, and why isn't it there anymore, and how can it be there again? Or like how we know middle schoolers like aren't just going to sit in chairs for 6 hours. So like how can something like a bright spot like that?
I have a 12-year-old breathing down my neck every week about this. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you're not alone.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it was not an easy decision. I think when you look at the history of the why the movement break started, right? There was definite elements of COVID in which there was the required mask break. It was considered the only time in which students might be able to have a snack safely. And also when during hybrid and remote, or during hybrid instruction, when there wasn't an opportunity to really collaborate in a group of peers, like there wasn't a class for movement, or it wasn't an opportunity for movement within the class. It was that desperate need to make sure that we offered that. And then it shifted last year when we started off again needing mask breaks. And then when February hit, that no longer needed to be put into place. But then, so we maintained that, the movement break. I think what we found were there students who enjoyed it and loved it? Absolutely. But what we also we received word of and had to counteract was that during those unstructured times is when a lot of unkind behavior was occurring. And often actually, I think, I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but many of the investigations that I had to do rooted in movement break. Because it was this unstructured time for middle schoolers. We didn't have the play structure of an elementary school to put into place. So when we made we were making the decision, working through with staff, I can tell you that what we encouraged was we wanted our staff to read their room, encourage their professional discretion of, if you've got some students who've got the wiggles, if you've got the students who are struggling to participate, it's a beautiful day outside. Do that 20-minute reading, take a movement break where you as a teacher have control of your classroom to go for a walk, to be outside for that period of time, and then come back and continue instruction. And having that be the way in which students are encouraged to get that movement break, to have that opportunity. And as opposed to this 15-minute chunk in which all sixth grade is out on using Remington field, and trying to be able to monitor that effectively was a significant challenge. We knew the benefits of getting movement, but we wanted to find that developmentally appropriate way for middle school.
That makes sense. Believe me, I'm not volunteering to be outside with an entire sixth grade. Definitely not. It's not for the faint of heart. I understand that. I think the thing I like about it being in the schedule is that then it's like it has to happen. Mm-hmm. Whereas when it's not in the schedule, it's like sort of left up to teachers' discretion. And you hope that if there's kids that need to get their wiggles out or just horsing around, not able to focus, like some educators feel sort of confident enough in their classroom management skills to be able to do something. Let's take a walk. Let's go do some stairs. Let's go out on the field for a little bit. Let's just shake it up, do some relays in the classroom or whatever. Mm-hmm. Drop and give me 20 or whatever it is. You know, some educators feel confident about embedding that within curriculum activities. And some are like, it's just easier to control kids in a classroom when they're like sitting in chairs. Mm-hmm. You know,
and that's a good reminder for us too, just to reemphasize that with teachers. I think the middle level, the way the schedule is set up, they transition every 56 minutes. So they are moving, some going up and down stairs multiple times. So they do have that kind of natural break. And a brief social opportunity in the hallways.
But I think it's a good point though, because as administrators, we see how a lot of different teachers choose to make those decisions. But that idea of sharing even within a building and being able to see what's available and what are options, I think is definitely some good feedback that we can bring back to our buildings. I think too, we've asked teachers to use creatively look at the schedule and use things like our flex block, where it's one of those times where students get what they need. And so there might be students who are getting that movement and that cognitive break by engaging in the music program. They might be, but I think at the team level rather than the grade level, teams and teachers are looking to use outdoor time or to use a movement break or to use a cognitive break. Even putting games in front of students where they may not have that opportunity or not be able to engage with their peers to have it be a low tech time of the day and not in front of their Chromebook. So those are some things that we're also doing to ensure of that variety throughout their day so that they're not just sitting down or just in front of their technology during the day.
If I could add, we did a learning walk last week, Becky, in your building. And I think also, so one, yes, it's a good reminder, right? Always a good reminder to put that out there and not have 12-year-olds come home and say they didn't move.
I will say that my answer to the 12-year-old constituent at my house is, oh gosh, that'd be a great thing to bring up if you were on the student council. So you should join the student council.
So, parental choice on that one. But I will say too, the way some of the teachers designed the lesson. So when we went through 2 rooms, there was a history class and there was an English class. One had students working in lit circles where they had poured out into the hallway. They had groups, everyone had a task and they were moving. And then the next room over had students in and out of the hallway working on a project and putting together a presentation for the class. So I think also the design of a lesson too makes a difference, but your point is well taken around how we can just put that reminder on.
Yeah. Right. And it can be tier 1, right? So like we know kids that might need extra movement. We know kids that must have extra movement and they might have some kind of accommodation plan or IEP or something. They might have something in place that says they need certain breaks at certain times or certain types of movement before certain types of learning. But for all kids, movement's important. And I think that we'll continue this conversation at SWAC, my SWAC people at, and maybe there could be ways to sort of give resources to teachers or maybe have PE teachers or something, speak at a staff meeting about, I don't know. We're sort of like talking behind the scenes about that type of stuff because I think that it really comes down to, like a classroom management thing. Because when lots of bodies are moving, then they're talking and then it's like, I've lost control of the classroom. But it doesn't have to be that way. And physical activity can lead to more focus. I'm getting on a soapbox, but I think we agree. Any resources that you would have to share? So there was mention of the audit of tiered supports available in each building. Is that like a formal audit, or is that just like something that you guys are always doing? I think it was in 3A.
Yeah, that's something that I think we're always doing. This DESE has put out a tremendous amount of resources to help us be able to go through and follow that process. We started in our administrative team last year and looking at where our strengths lie and where are some gaps. And I think we want to, especially as we continue to build that understanding of MTS or multi-tiered system of supports and universal design of learning. Didn't want to use the jargon. Our strengths will become clearer and our areas of growth will become clearer as well.
So it's like self-study, self-assessment.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's great. That's important to do. And then, okay, so I think I have one more big one. What's the middle school level doing to meet the requirements of the Genocide Education Act that was signed last year? And who's overseeing this in each school, and how will it be delivered consistently across all 3 schools?
And that's something we're going to talk about at the kind of the district level, because it is pretty broad. And I think the purpose of the act was more to focus on the funding and the grant opportunities that are available. And then the curriculum we're hoping is coming next. But I think that's still to be determined. I know that there are pockets where specifically Holocaust and other examples of genocide are being discussed, but it's not in a consistent manner, focusing on different factors of genocide. But I think it's naturally embedded. So we'll talk. I don't think that it will lie in just the social studies curriculum. I think that could be more of a shared, where appropriate, especially at the middle level. But I think more to come on that. Tim Frazier and Tina are, working on that too, to provide more guidance for us.
Okay, sounds good. Because I think the way it's written, it says, in high school, there are these obvious places where we're going to teach it, but in middle school, it can sort of be anywhere and everywhere. And I don't like when I see language like that, because I'm like, that doesn't hold anybody accountable. Like, this is important for us to be teaching or talking about and having deep discussions about. And so it's sort of saying like, oh, you can read a book over here that's sort of about this, and you can read a book, and it's like not cohesive or robust really. And so I like an update on that as soon as.
So, in speaking to with Dr. Frazier about this, we're continuing to work with the new legislation. I know it doesn't require every grade, every subject teaches these, but there are moments throughout our curriculum where this makes sense to be explicit, but also included in some of the novels, Counting Stars or The Diary of Anne Frank, or where it hits on these topics. So it's a matter of like, where does it fit explicitly, either through the U.S. history curriculum or world history curriculum, but also gets embedded in different ways. The other piece I would mention is our, I don't want to use an acronym, but a World of Difference curriculum, and the work that we use with our students with the Anti-Defamation League hits on some of these topics as well. So what we can do is, if it's helpful, we can prepare some information about this and kind of where it's strategically, it can be seen by students within our curriculum, and we can share that at a future meeting if that's helpful.
I'd like to back up to making sure it's a vertical, coordination, because as a high school teacher, I think that I'm teaching and then I already read that, and there's nothing more awful and offensive for them to be like, I'm not going to read that again about the Holocaust. It's just gross. So I just would encourage the vertical collaboration between the middle school and the high school, so that kids are not feeling like I'm reading that same old book again, which is just not good.
So the one thing that I would add on to is that as part of our literacy needs assessment that we're working through all year, we can point out places in the high school curriculum standards where this legislation specifically speaks to that. But as far as the middle school, we're trying to really elicit teacher voice in that process to understand what texts we're teaching and where does that fit most authentically throughout the grade level. So I think part of us unpacking that that needs assessment throughout the year, hearing from our teachers, having those folks in to give us some recommendations, will have some natural connections to this work, and certainly can share.
Support. Yep. Thank you.
Megan?
Hi. I'm really happy about the kids having access to the advisory. I think that's fantastic. And that note about the high-speed internet for families that need assistance with that. I think that's fantastic. I mean, it's really important to have access to the panorama data, right? Sounds like a really fantastic tool, to be used for our kids, throughout their educational career here in Franklin. And so I think sounds good to me, and I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Can I ask another question?
Yep.
Don't look at me like that. I don't know the history of whether this used to happen, but I know across the United States, it's like the classic 8th grade trip to DC. Has Franklin ever done that? And is that something we could look into, or what? Like, my sister does it in Kentucky. My friend does it in Maryland, and it's like,
We all did.
why are we doing that?
Trip. We used to do that trip.
Rob, don't you want to take kids to DC? I would help chaperone. Yeah.
So we used to offer that trip. I don't know when we stopped doing it or why, but we.
And who used to fund it? Like,
well, that might have been the reason it stopped.
Student families.
It was expensive, and it was there was an accessibility component to it. But I certainly could try to do a little digging and figure out when and where and how. We do offer trips to students. Obviously, hit high school, but certainly the DC trip was one that I can remember being on with the folks at the table. So
09, I think that was.
09?
Yeah.
Probably the last year.
It might have been the last time. I'm not usually invited more than once.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Jagir, who's next?
Next up, we have the high school here to present their school improvement plans. Have I told the joke about Emmitt Smith after he won the Super Bowl, or should I just stop there? All right, we'll get right into it. Next up, we have Mr. Hanna, the principal of Franklin High School, who's joined by 2 of his assistant principals, Mrs. Jennifer Santasuso and Mr. Ryan Augusta. I'm joining both assistant principals.
All right, good evening. Yes, I'm here flanked by Jen Santasuso and Ryan Augusta as members of our administrative team, and also a shout out to Dr. Weber and Ms. Klein, who are at home. They'll be joining us later on, but it's important for you to meet us as a team. There's 5 of us that start up every morning, making sure we have enough staff and welcoming our students into the building and making sure that we're running systems that support such a wide variety of next steps. And so hopefully in our discussion tonight with our school improvement plan, you can kind of hear the variety of places that we are looking at, focusing on. Really, and I think a school improvement plan is only as good as the focus that goes along with it. There's lots of different things we can do in the field of education, and there's lots of things people could bring up that we're not doing. And that's okay, because you can't do everything. You got to focus in on like the big areas of our, need. And to be honest, right now that sits with our support of our advisory program to meet the social and emotional needs of our students and the work on our curriculum, so that it's guaranteed and viable, and it gives all of our students an opportunity to experience the same types of understandings. And if we've got those 2 things nailed down over the course of this year and next year, we then can take some serious inventory on where the adjustments need to be made to improve our achievement, to improve our students' social and emotional well-being. And so hopefully tonight, as you hear from myself, Ryan, and Jen, you kind of get an understanding of where we are and what we're going to be looking at to make decisions in the future to allow for our students and families to really feel supported and successful in whatever their next steps are. Obviously, Mr. Jagir has done a nice job in aligning our schools. So a lot of the stuff we'll talk about has already kind of been brought up a little bit this evening already. But in terms of the first area in social and emotional well-being, I really want to focus on that second aspect, specifically around advisory and what it is that the advisory at the high school looks like. So for us, it's a 10-minute experience every day with once a month, our ability to move to a 40-minute experience. And so that is the same group of kids. I have my reading glasses on because I have some notes here I want to make sure I hit on. I can read them. All right, but I'll take them off too. So the point of the everyday check-in, just to give you an idea, the teacher is to welcome the students into the room, give them a smile, say their name, make sure the attendance is taken correctly. We go through our morning exercises and we have common communication that occurs during that protected window. That's the everyday piece. And so those students and teachers are seeing themselves every morning, and that's going to carry on for the time that they're in high school. The groups are a little larger than the middle school. That's because we had to put them in areas where we could have conversations with walls and acoustics that allowed for people to share. In other models where you have like smaller groups, but you're spread out all over the building, you end up trying to have 5 or 6 advisories in the cafeteria. And it's a really hard place to have honest conversation in a cafeteria setting where you're hearing echoes and multiple conversations. So we're really honoring, okay, so what exactly happens on those extended periods? We already had one. We have another one coming up later this month. So for an example, in our freshman extended advisory experience coming up later in October, the World of Difference students, 2 of which were honored earlier today as peer leaders with our Pledge of Allegiance, helped bring forward ADL supported curriculum to our freshmen to kind of understand the importance of a world of difference and what does it mean to celebrate differences and how can we interact in a way that's respectful, really geared towards 8th and 9th grade level students. So that's going to be the crux of their 40 minutes experience. Sophomores, on the other hand, are going to be getting a lesson in self-advocacy, how to write thoughtful emails to teachers when you have questions about things. Because oftentimes we'll get emails from people that'll just say, no, Mr. Hanna, just bang right to the question. And, knowing that it's a young person, you kind of have an understanding, but that's really not setting themselves up for success. We have a portrait of graduate skills. We have high expectations, but we need to help them along the way. Crafting a thoughtful, respectful email is something that, you often hear parents say, well, why can't you have this in high school? The laundry, how to, finance something without getting too high of an interest rate. What about thoughtful email writing? And so we've taken a lot of that feedback that we receive anecdotally in conversations and with our school council last year, we brainstormed a lot of things. When you hear people say, what is it that a school, should be doing? We're taking those topics and we're infusing them into our advisory program. So that's for the 10th graders. For 11th graders, as most of them now are at an age where they can get work permits and start working, we're working on writing resumes and cover letters. How do you organize yourself to get a job? And we see students come in all the time in the main office asking for, job, licenses to work applications, and they're really excited. And we feel like, hey, our workforce needs more people. There's no doubt about that. Let's equip them with the skills and understanding of how to organize what you've done to get to that next step. And for our seniors, it's something a little bit more mindful in October. We're talking about listening, not always feeling as though you have to respond. We think that, this idea of taking a breath, calming yourself, listening to watching someone's interaction, what can you gain from that, right? And so there's practices. So I guess the point is, over the course of the 4 years, you're going to have 40 unique, individualized, extended advisory experiences. On the daily basis, though, and this is the big idea, we talked to it with our staff on the first day of school, look people in the eye, say their first name, smile. And that's how you're going to get to know someone. And we've already heard students who have said, hey, this program is going pretty good. People are not complaining about it. And I can assure you, there's plenty of opinions around a full-on mandate. Here's what we're doing every single day. The fact of the matter is people are liking it because it's connection. And it's not under the stress of a grade or a team or something that you have to do, right? And our teachers have so much responsibility when it comes to, their daily curriculum or year curriculum, the College Board and the MCAS and all these different things. We protect this 10 minutes and it's feeling natural and it's feeling positive. And students are saying like, yeah, we like it. It gives us a chance to catch our breath. And this is going to be great. We've seen the evidence in other schools that have done it, and we're already feeling the transition. It gives us a great time to communicate. So talked a lot about advisory. Why? Because we believe in this importance of SEL. We want to kind of share that with you. Now, down as we continue on the list, advisory is one thing, but how do we respond is another. And so Mr. Augusta is going to talk a little bit about our administrative setup and what does the high school do to support students who may be, interacting in a way that needs some redirection. And I could talk after a little bit about the data, but I'd like for him to share some thoughts on that.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Ryan Augusta, assistant principal at the high school. I think for this goal, establishing consistent differentiated responses to student behavior that will promote student accountability and growth with the opportunity to restore a sense of community. I was writing down a lot of notes and preparing for this tonight and just kind of reminiscing on the past couple of years of the work we've done as an administrative team at the high school. And then also as an A-team, the administrative team at the district level. I think this went back to 2019, 2020. We did a lot of work using a textbook called Shifting Gears, and it really brought our team, I think, shifting our practice and our belief systems and looking at more restorative practices as a district and trying to align ourselves just in conversation and how we aligned our discipline matrix in our handbooks. I believe that was the 2020 school year to 2020 summer. And so I think that kind of shifted a lot of where we are today. We do a lot of work throughout the summer as a building-based team on building our matrix, updating it, and making any notes throughout the school year of what are some things that we're dealing with a lot. And taking a look through Aspen, taking a look at the data we have in front of us and how often we're responding to certain things. One of the things that was added this year was a fine for misbehavior in the elevator and damaging the elevator and having to call the elevator company come out to that. So just that's one example of some of the things that we shift to and how we use our admin meetings throughout the school year to try to have a conversation about ongoing behavior and how to keep students accountable. This year we have our team of 4 APs. Two of us are housed in each house office. So for us, Jen and I share the second floor house office, and this year has been really great to 1,600 students and certain number of students on our caseload, and 4 of us have 4 different schedules throughout the day, and extra responsibilities that are tacked onto our responsibility list of just our to-do lists. It's hard. It was hard to calibrate being on different floors and having different different schedules, but now I think sharing a physical space with Jen, it's been really great to calibrate and pause and just kind of walk 5-6 feet and just check in and, hey, what do you think about this? And I think we spend a good amount of time throughout the day meeting with students together, having conversations with staff together, and I think just really working on that alignment and how we respond to students. So there is that a little bit more of that shared experience, and so we're consistently responding to students and families as a team. So I know I'm missing a lot here in my notes. In terms of data and trying to develop a consistent tracking system, we use Aspen very consistently with our secretaries and our admin assistants, just to try to track behavior and our follow-up. And then we do, in our conversations as an administrative team, we have a lot of follow-up on things we're dealing with. And I know Jen and I, like I said, are aligned in, pretty consistently having conversation about what things we're dealing with, but also then bringing that back to the full team to bring Mr. Hanna up to speed and, inform him what some of the things we're dealing with, but then also bring in the other 2 assistant principals we work with. And then in terms of kind of how we're responding with students, each assistant principal leads an instructional support team, and the behaviors, attendance, and a lot of data we pull in Aspen, and a lot of the things we're working with in Panorama are topics at those meetings that we have conversations with our guidance counselors, our adjustment counselors, our nurse, and our special education team chair and department head. So those are where we're using that information in making our decisions with students and trying to find ways to support those students moving forward.
Thank you, Ryan. And yes, as Ryan stated, so our assistant principals are 2 separate offices. We've kind of shifted up a little bit of our model. So we have, with our adjustment counselors, each has less students than they had last year, so we can be more responsive to students' needs when it comes to social and emotional support. With our assistant principals, we have one that's now acting as a full-time assistant principal, so we have less students per caseload to allow for more consistent responsivity. We feel as though if we could get to things in a manner that's within a couple of days, we have a much greater chance, as that's how young people tend to respond best. If it lingers past 3 days, it's kind of like that never happened, or it's just too far away, right? But if we can get in there in a couple of school days, then that's where we're going to see great return on reflection in some of those moments. So it's like Tier 1 is we have our homeroom, our advisory rather, every day that's kind of checking in, making sure people are in a good space and look ready for the day. And then Tier 2, when we have certain things that occur, okay, yeah, but we have a system that can address it in a timely fashion. And the great work of these assistant principals is right in line with that. As I see working specifically, I see Heidi in the audience with our DEI coordinator. We're still kind of like building the tiered system to leverage that expertise. And that's why it's a part of our goal. So how do we take that background and that perspective and utilize it into interactions that occur between, students and staff and within our community? So an obvious resource that's housed right in the main office at the high school. Heidi and I talk every afternoon and morning and check in with each other. And we're going to continue to build capacity with that role as we understand, the limits of as a district leader, but making sure the high school gets plenty of support when it comes to those things. So that's really supporting the students from an SEL perspective. The second is our work on a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And in having studied different schools that have had success, thank you. One of the most important things you need to have understood is exactly what's going on in all your classes to show increase in achievement. Because you can't make adjustments to assessment policies. You can't make adjustments to, particular areas of focus that MCAS data gives us back, that SAT or College Board data gives us back, unless we already have established what it is we do. And so Jen's going to talk a little bit about the work that's been going on, not just in departments on codifying what it is we do in our classes. And for you to put it in your perspective as school committee members, when we come in the winter and share with you our program of studies, what we have now is like a pretty short paragraph on what the class is all about. What we're going to have after the completion of this goal will be, as an example on the goals, is a full unit description with detailed vocabulary, with experiments, with connections to SEL, DEI, portrait of graduate skill sets. This is what is going on in this class. And so when we bring new folks in, sorry if I'm stealing your thunder.
You are. Good to take it.
But this is where we're going to be able to see true gains. And when people join our team, they'll say, okay, this is what we do. Versus right now, we're not quite there yet. So it's a lot of and Jen could talk about the work that the team is doing on the side. Thanks.
Hi, Jen Santos. So nice to meet you. As Josh mentioned, I just want to share a little bit about how we are creating an engaging and rigorous curriculum by making sure that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So currently, teachers are implementing an understanding by design framework by Mackay and Wiggins, where teachers are looking at the end result. So what is it that we want our graduates at Franklin High School, what skills do we want them to know and develop? And that's outlined in our portrait of a graduate, and it's also outlined by grade in our Massachusetts state frameworks. And so an example of this great work was last Friday, our English department, I popped by to see what they were doing, and they were in course partners. So ninth grade teachers with ninth grade teachers, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And they were using one of the project rooms, which is beautiful. If you've ever been to the high school, with whiteboards all around. And they were creating a timeline, 9 through 12, and identifying where are these skills being identified, 9 through 12, and where are they being developed. And there's alignment there and there's calibration there. And from there, they're going to, like Josh said, create these curriculum maps, stage 1 of UBD, where they're identifying those enduring understandings, identifying those essential questions and skills, what portrait of a graduate skill is being taught here, looking at DEI and making sure that how we're conveying these skills and developing these skills is inclusive and diverse. And how are we developing SEL competencies throughout as well. So it's fantastic work that they're doing horizontally to align with one another through their course partners, so that if you should have a set of twins and they're in different classes, they're enjoying the same experience and they're being assessed on the same skills. And then similarly, they're going to meet with grade level teachers above them to make sure that they're aligned vertically. So here's a skill that we're introducing in 9th grade. How does that develop and progress in 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade? So we're excited that by 24-25, that school year, in the program of studies, we'll have that model unit that's linked in our presentation. That will be linked for community members, families, students, and even new staff that we hire to take a look at that and be able to see the horizontal and vertical alignment. So it's really exciting work that they're doing in all curriculum areas. And the literacy review. Yeah. So right now, Hill for Literacy is conducting an audit pre-K through 12. Last week, they visited the high school and they met with focus groups. And so again, they're going to provide some great data for us to look at in terms of looking at our curriculum and just, again, making sure that the programs we have are reinforcing the skills that are needed pre-K through 12. And it also affords us the opportunity to say, okay, here are the skills we need. Let's examine the ways in which we are using texts, and are these the best texts to develop those skills? And if not, what can we include and maybe what can we remove? So it's really exciting work that we're doing, and I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, Jen did a great job last Friday building a schedule for, I think, every special educator and every English teacher and every department chair to come down and be interviewed in groups no larger than 5, I think, or in 2 different spaces over the course of like 4 or 5 hours. And it's a matrix that these folks are experts at, thankfully, because we were asked to do those things from time to time to really gain a true understanding of what's going on in our schools. And then we're able to say, are we reading the books at a high enough level? Should we go higher? Should we have some intermediate areas? Maybe, you know what I'm saying? So great stuff all around. I'm trying to scroll here. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but okay. All right. So the multi-tiered systems, this is an area we're saying, okay, how do we systemize the big ideas of advisory and curriculum writing? And so one thing we've done, which, we're excited about in the contract negotiations of last spring, is to bring our department heads further into part of the evaluation process, being able to get into classrooms more consistently, give feedback around things that they're seeing with our teachers. We know we have a content expertise, as kind of talked a little bit about earlier in the evening, as a big part of a high school experience. And we need those experts who are our directors and department chairs to have that perspective to bring to the table. So that's an example of continuing to build multi-tiered systems. And along those same lines, we're just going to continue to examine, listen to where we are, ask people for feedback, and how do we make adjustments. And if we continue to do that at a high level, we feel like that's going to be success in advisory and with our curriculum writing. And then, finally, in terms of communication, the high school has obviously a wide community with all sorts of different interests. And so we have, I would say, 3 or 4 main ways we communicate. One is through the website, which obviously isn't 2-way. That's 1 way. Another is our newsletters that we send out every 2 weeks, which again isn't really 1 way, 2 ways rather. That's 1 way. Although we do get feedback on the newsletters what to add. So it's some form of 2-way communication. The third, and one that we would like to continue to see increased participation, are our monthly PCC meetings, which generally at the high school, people kind of begin to fracture out into smaller boosters club areas or special interests of what it is that their kids are a part of. And that's okay, because there's so much that goes on in an afternoon in that place. It would be really hard for you as a parent to try to digest all of the opportunities. There's just far too many, in my opinion. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have access to them, but to have meetings that kind of addresses all those things, it becomes too kind of centralized and focused. So that's like the third. And then what I would say is, we are, and I believe we practice a very open and honest style of communication, like reach out to us with specific questions. Our guidance counselors are very responsive. Our administration is very responsive. Our teachers are very responsive. And we know that the questions and the wants are going to be nuanced. And so we're going to need to hear from you individually a little bit about what you want versus us being able to create presentations that are going to hit on all of, the things. I think there was a question raised, like, what would you want for communication out of a high school? And I have a high school student at home. She's starting her freshman year and it's going okay. There's ups and downs. I guess I would say I would want some basics, so I'm not really caught off guard with whatever the schedule is. Make sure that she's at school on the right day. And then I would want to know who to reach out to if I had really specific questions about their experience. And I would want the person answering to be able to talk really intelligently about what it is that my daughter or any of the students in the school would know. And I feel like we have the systems for that. Our guidance counselors have manageable case sizes. They work with a particular assistant principal, a particular adjustment counselor, and we have systems to support those type of individualized questions. That said, I'm totally open to the idea that we have ways to improve our communication. I don't think that there ever isn't an opportunity to get better. And if there's a want that folks have, I'm happy to listen and see what adjustments we can make. Currently, I'd love to use the PCC model to improve two-way communication, but I know people's schedules are busy. So we have school council, we have parent reps, we have PCC. We usually maybe get one or two people and one or two people online. Out of when you send an email to folks, it's like 6,600. So it's a pretty small percentage of folks that and that's not like a slight on anyone. I just think that's a reality to people's schedules. And I think the small groups that students are a part of really get communicated to well. So if you're in these, teams or groups or whatever, you're aware of what it is that's coming. But so the general summary of our communication goal, again, first to admit, always opportunity to get better. And if you have thoughts on that, I'm wide open to making adjustments. So that's our school improvement goal.
Okay.
Summary.
All right. We're going to go backwards this time. I'm going to start with Megan. Megan, do you have any questions or comments?
Oh, wow. Not expecting to go first.
Switching it up.
I usually get to formulate my sort of thoughts. Thanks. Advisory. I'm glad you talked a lot about that. I think that's a fantastic thing, like I mentioned before. And I guess that's all I can think of right now. But yeah, thanks for their presentation.
You're welcome. Really quickly, too, advisory and the general curriculum that's been shared with you as it stands right now. We're going to do another check in January to kind of get some feedback, but was crafted by, first of all, this isn't the first time Franklin High School had an advisory. There was like a model that occurred about 4 or 5 years ago. We took a lot of the bones of that and just kind of retooled them. And we had 7 teachers over the course of the summer who put in countless hours to formulate communications to our teams and how to organize. And so there's a lot of work that's been done by, teaching staff to kind of make this real. And that's probably the reason it's had some success, is because it was built by people who were in the rooms doing the work. So thank you and kudos to the team that's organized that advisory.
Oh, and I'll just add one more thing. Like when I was a student in Pennsylvania in high school, we had something similar to this. And I remember really liking that as a kid. And it was just a sort of a session that I really looked forward to every day. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Elise?
Just thank you for putting this all together. And again, I think sort of what I said in the middle school, for us to be able to sit here and see ECDC, elementary, middle school, high school, it really makes a lot of sense. So kudos to central office and your team and you guys for focusing on the high school piece there. I don't really have any specific questions, just sort of thank you. And it all looks good. And it looks like we're on the right track. And I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah.
Dave, thank you.
Thank you all for this presentation. It's excellent information. And yeah, it's been touched on, mentioned with the advisory. It's great with you presenting this information of how it aligns with our portion of our graduate goals to really not just quantify student success based on just pure grades, but also really what the life skills that we're teaching our students and sending them off into the world post Franklin Public Schools are. So it's excellent to see. And to that, you mentioned kind of like cultivating like life skills through the advisory. So, and then developing this curricula. So like, what do you envision the curricula for advisory looking like over the next few years? How do you envision that developing?
Well, obviously part of it's with feedback, right? So we're going to kind of see how these lessons go. I think World of Difference, sticking with the freshman year, makes a lot of sense, as we have, 3 or 4 different schools, maybe more, all coming together to kind of have that experience about what it means to be connected to people with different, languages, belief systems, backgrounds, etc. And that's what a World of Difference really does so well. I have to say, so that the treats and snacks by the Diversity Awareness Club tonight, we got to go down there for a little while. What an outstanding organization. And that's like the evidence that things are going well. You have 50 to 100 kids. They had a whole wide smorgasbord of snacks. I didn't even have to eat dinner. I ate desserts from all sorts of around the world, from India to, I think there was something even from the Ukraine and everywhere in between. And it was just great to see them proud of bringing forth culture. And I think, if it weren't for programs like A World of Difference, that wouldn't be as available. People might not be as proud to share those things. So we keep that there, and we keep refining what the 40 minutes looks like based on the feedback from our students and from our teachers. So I think it's a little too early to project exactly what the curriculum is going to look like over the next couple of years. I think the fact that we're off to a start where people are positive about the interactions on a daily basis. And, if you go back and even look into 1999 after Columbine, one of the most dramatic pieces of advice that, the folks that learned and studied that incident was around interactions where people feel supported and seen and heard. And that's why I know it sounds maybe simple, but to look someone in the eye and to say their first name and to smile, if we do that every day, and we see once in a while, there might be someone like myself who's not smiling after I used to, and now we have a process to check. Before having this, there wasn't as much of a guarantee. This now puts into place something that's going to give us the best chance to see and help people well before maybe they get to a place where they're feeling so desperate. And that's a worst case scenario, obviously, but it's real. And it's one of the reasons why programs like this are supported. So I think long term on the 40-minute lessons, we're still kind of crafting that in a way that is honorable to the teachers. And in the short term, we're making sure that we are existing in a really safe and supportive community.
Thank you very much. Then to the goal of wanting to see the downtrend student behaviors through the behavior data tracking process. I assume that's both both in the aggregate and at the individual level. So will we be having data on specific behaviors like over time to try to see like those downtrends, and then also will we be tracking outcomes of restorative practices to evaluate the effectiveness of those and maybe tweak those over time?
I'll tackle the first part of that question. So when we add an incident into Aspen, it always has a behavior code. Those mirror the codes that DESE puts out of what a behavior might be or where it kind of is categorized in our state reporting. So in a sense there, we can organize the data based off of an incident category with those numbers and with those behavior codes. So we're able to look at how many students cut a class throughout a certain month or even a school year or whatever term or semester. We can break down the calendar year however we want to or whatever we need to for types of data. And then the second part of your question, I don't know, great thoughts on that, but I think in terms of our follow-up, I think it's a little bit harder, I think, for us to categorize. But
I'm happy to chime in as well.
Okay, sorry.
But I'll let you finish.
No, I think that's something that we try to, again, calibrate as a team at the building. But I think we try to take a lot of consideration to who the student is, what the incident was, their past. They get in trouble a lot. Is this a repeat offense? Is this something that we're able to make progress with? And in that restorative measures, are we making any progress with that individual student? So I do think, I'm a data person, and Josh will be the first one to say that kind of, nerd out on that stuff. But I think that in those instances, it might be hard to categorize just based off of how we are working with students a little more holistically and try to make sure that we're meeting the student needs in those moments with whatever incident we're dealing with that family.
Also to add, as Panorama becomes a part of our practice, and I think this is, a question was asked earlier, like, are you going to hold against someone an indiscretion in sixth grade? And the answer to that is, no, assuming that, that whatever it wasn't like really disruptive and overly dramatic. But one of the things we've heard over the last couple of years is like, this behavior has been going on for a while. And we would find out that these students were connected at an elementary school, then a middle school, now a high school. And we're just hearing about it in ninth grade. And the families are saying this has been happening for a while. Panorama will give us a little bit of insight onto what maybe interactions were occurring so we can kind of understand what plans can we put into place to support maybe this conflict that maybe it's best that those folks aren't necessarily with each other at all times, or this is an actual habit of behavior that is not in line with our expectations. And so I think, when it comes to kind of the data of this, as we begin to use this new tool, it'll help paint a picture that I think will be able to address some of the feedback we've received regarding students' interactions.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then just one last question. You mentioned communication strategies and how now you're open to areas of improvement. So like, what would you say is like the ideal level of family engagement, and how that you would like to see at FHS, and how do these initiatives kind of serve to get us on track to that vision?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. I put a survey out my first summer here to families of Franklin High School to ask what you would like to see as a first year principal, you know, and responses were wide in variety. Some were like, I don't really want to ever hear from you because if I'm hearing from you, things aren't going well. And others were like, we should have like daily email, and obviously everything in between. And so I guess my answer to that question would be I think ideal community participation would be whatever the community is interested and comfortable participating in. I mean, we get great support at our events. We have like caring community members who have a high interest in the success of our school and in our program. So I don't know if there's like huge room for growth per se, but I guess my only ask would be that they would reach out and let's have a conversation about whatever questions you have so we can understand your perspective and strategize a response. I'm always open, and our administrative team is always open to a phone call or an interaction. And so beyond that, I wouldn't want to ask parents to be doing any much more than providing for their children to get to school on time and support them and trust our work with them. And I think that's about the best I could say. And that's for me personally as a parent too. Like I'm going to do the best I can to support the school and support my kid. And I don't know. And I guess I would want to know, is there something we're not doing as a school that other schools are, or that they would really be helpful? And if that's the case, I'm happy to create a solution. But right now, I feel like we have a bunch of different ways we communicate. And overall, anecdotally, the feedback's been, yeah, it's pretty good, or even better than that. Yeah, it's great. But either way, we're trying to get better at it every day. And I just wouldn't want to proclaim to be an expert on what it means to have, community engagement. What does that look like? I would love for our school to have opportunity for parents to commit a bit more, but from a standpoint of like developmental age-wise, they're not going to like be volunteers in the classrooms. We do have a school store where we might be able to flex in some parents to help work at the school store during lunch. That's kind of a long-term goal, but we also have quite a security system that is complicated to navigate during the school day. So trying to be realistic along with keeping the building secure in a way. So I don't know if that answers your question.
If I can make a plug just for some information I shared last meeting around just communication in general. And I encourage, I'm also a parent of a freshman, communicating with the people closest to the question or the concern or whatever it is the best way to get the quickest response or the most detailed information is really working. Sometimes folks might reach out, but might reach out to a broad spectrum of people in a variety of different roles. And I think I would really encourage, we put information on our website. We'll continue to push that out. But just if you're looking for information about something happening within the classroom, reaching out to that classroom teacher. If you're thinking about an incident that occurred, maybe it's behavioral, maybe it's reaching out to the assistant principal of the school. If it's something to do with class, it could be a guidance counselor or a teacher. So those types of things, I just think being mindful. And one thing I've been trying to do to prepare my student for the future lessons that'll happen in advisory is coaching him on how to email his teachers and start to resolve his own questions and problems and try to figure that out. So those are just ways I think that help, but certainly there's no shortage of opportunities if students are involved in student life in school or beyond where parents can engage and certainly learn more. So we keep that in mind, and I think we have to keep asking the question so we can continue to grow.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
No questions, just a couple comments. So thank you once again for coming here. It's great to see everything come together from ECDC all the way to the high school level, and just seeing how it supports the district goals. I think it really sets the foundation for these students to really excel and grow. But where I see the really great potential is really the dividends that we'll get in future years. I think this year sets us up for really the good foundation so that when they do move up to the next level, be it a grade, be it a level from elementary, middle, or middle to high school, we have those kind of learnings and structure in place, which I think Lucas, Mr. Jagir, you've definitely we're focusing on the systems that will help us. And I think this will really set these students up for success and be able to start at a higher place the next year versus where they are today. And we'll make things easier for you all to come. So the goal of reducing behavioral issues, I think that will help because we set that structure in advance. So thank you. And really, I'm looking forward to seeing how this year goes, but I'm more so looking forward to see where we start next year as a result of the work that we're doing right now. So thank you all.
Okay.
Actually, to build on what my colleague was saying, I know Dr. Hearn was often fond of talking about it being an iterative process. So it is really exciting to see, when we talk about so many of the designs and the alignments with the curriculum that, we really are just continuing to improve and look forward to, to next semester and to next year and then years after that. So it is really exciting to kind of see the foundations that are already being built and that are working well and then to know what could be coming down the pipeline. I loved the thoughtful design behind the advisory. It was great to hear. And it's my daughter just kind of, entered her own advisory program in 6th grade. And it's something that she already kind of comes home and talks about. And it's great to hear, what's already being done. I love, the concept about the emails. I wish some of my coworkers kind of went through that same training. It would be fantastic. And the financial literacy piece as well. Because when we kind of later on in the meeting, we're going to talk about some of the MASC resolutions. And one of those resolutions talks about like a financial literacy education. And when I was kind of going through the packet, like that's something that is so important to be able to talk to students about, just basic financial literacy. I remember this guy I worked with my first job right out of college. He got a brand new car and he thought it was a steal, because he didn't have to put anything down and it was, it was all this, great rates until all of a sudden he got that first bill. And it was like a 23% interest rate that he was paying on a car for 7 years. So he also would have, a coworker would have done well in a program like that. Something else too, I want to talk about in terms of the panorama. So we've talked about it a lot over the past couple of meetings and about all the great potential that it has. And we used to really kind of streamline how we track and monitor students. But during the middle school presentation, we also talked about some like the tried and true methods of simply just talking to the teachers, former teachers and such. I want to make sure once, when we are kind of, fully into panorama, that, we're still relying on some of the old school, kind of just walking the streets, talking to the teachers, methods, correct? This isn't just kind of the end all be all. This is just an easy way to pull in all of that information.
Look, of course. I mean, I think we've learned the last couple of years, there's a lot more power in a meeting like this where we're together in the same room than on a computer, right? The reality is we do have turnover in positions and people leave and go in other places. And it's important to make sure that information is shared somewhere so it doesn't just go with the human being. But the best way to understand how things are going and who's who and how can we support each other is face-to-face communication. That's never going to go away. This tool just helps. There's a lot of students. I mean, there's almost 1,700 kids at Franklin High School. That's a lot of humans to keep any type of organized track of. I'll say we're not really keeping track of them, but there's a record. There's like, okay, what are they up to? What are they into? This and that. And it's important to have, I think, something more than just word of mouth. But obviously the communication that occurs between the middle schools and the high school and between teams is really important too.
Just to jump into that, I was talking about our instructional support teams. So when we lead that meeting, we bring, just for example, I have 6 tabs open on my Google Chrome just for that one meeting to find the information in those different places. I think Ms. Morrison kind of made a comment about that we have access to all this information now, but it's more collecting it in a more shareable manner. So when we get to those moments, we're not using 6 different tools at once to find that information and to be able to then have the conversation. So in my prepping my team for that meeting, making sure they have all the links and have all those things, I think this will just be really streamlining that process to share that information. I really, knowing my team very well, I don't see a lot of us shifting our follow-up of going in person. I know my adjustment counselor, she makes several phone calls to middle school adjustment counselors to ask about students that she's meeting right now for the first time in 9th grade. So I don't see a lot of those practices shifting. I do think that the tool will put the information more in front of us, make it a little more accessible, just to be using in those moments with those conversations. So.
Awesome. The other component to this is you can survey students, and then the surveys get collected back to Panorama. So when you start to ask questions to kids, you can start to categorize information more effectively, and it's all within the same system. So when we start to ask kids questions, like we would with DECA, we talked about that in early childhood, where there's some ratings, and DESA at the elementary school has, do you hit developmentally students in middle and high school, asking them directly as opposed to a teacher rating them who they might have 1/5 of their day with, makes sense to have student input. So that's another layer to the information that's available as well. So just wanted to share that there's other components to this in addition to what was discussed.
Well, thank you all. Really, truly appreciate that. And I'm really excited too about just the ease of being able to take a look at all that data. And one other kind of question, actually, I think this might be more geared towards the superintendent's office. So now that we've seen, everything from ECDC up to the high school level, at our last meeting, I kind of talked about how we had, there was a strategic objective number 5.
Yep.
That's going to be discussed, at the next meeting. Unless I missed something along the way, it seemed like each one of like the ECDC elementary, middle school, and high school, no one was kind of hitting on that strategic objective number 5. What I might suggest in the future is that if we do kind of have, one of these systems that is kind of integral and is going to hit on each one of these districts, if we might be able to front load that, right, so that way we can see it well in advance, and also have opportunities to see how the high school is going to be able to integrate 20% of the objective. Because kind of for better or worse, you're stuck with me through at least one more round of these, and so I would love to see that front loaded before we start kind of getting into some of the finer details.
Understood. And the goal is to have 5 goals shared by each level and have that. This year, because we're shifting and having more intentionality around it, we've said in the past where we've only shared 4 goals, and we had DEI as a bottom qualifier that says each of these goals has pieces of it embedded. It felt like this particular at this time, it made sense to have a DEI presentation prepared. But I do see the point, and the goal would be next year, we've included what these topics mean. Starting next meeting, share some of the goals that we're setting forth, developing an action plan that has goals for each level. And then next year at this time, you'd be seeing the middle school goals related to that work. And then maybe it's included in each of those 4 areas, but ultimately we can do that in real time and have that just be part of the school presentations by level. But we're trying to stage this out and trying to provide information that is manageable. And it was one of these decisions that we made, and particularly I made, was to say, if we're going to be explicit about that work, maybe we need to dedicate time to it separately, but ultimately it should be part of what is presented by our administrators. So this time next year, you can expect to hear more about those initiatives by level by our admin teams.
Thank you.
Yep.
Camille? First, I'd like to say I appreciate your comment, Josh, about that the way people group generally in high school is through their clubs or their sports. Because I like the newsletter that it's 1 page and it's visual too. It's not, I get so much that's text, and we're overloaded with information anyway. And I do find that the smaller groups do communicate, and your newsletter doesn't have to be all things to all people where people start to ignore it, or they just you can't remember where you read it. So I appreciate the way it looks and that it's colorful too, because it can get hard to keep looking at Calibri font for everything, the black and white, everything. And then I wanted to comment on and encourage the guaranteed curriculum and the vertical and horizontal alignment, and for parents who, because that might seem like jargon as well, but horizontal alignment is meaning that, well, think back when most of us went to public school. If you got Mrs. Jones for English, she might test, your whole grade is based on vocabulary. And then you might go to Mr. Smith, and then his whole class is you're reading one book. And you can't, I don't love the argument about that if you have triplets in the district, they're getting the same thing. That's just me personally, because I've heard it too much for 8 years. But because we teachers would argue, well, I don't want all of them to get exactly the same experience, because if you extrapolate that out to college, then every college kid is going to talk about The Great Gatsby in exactly the same way, and they have no other perspectives, and the teacher can't. So there's a beautiful balance that I'm encouraging and going to keep encouraging of. The reason why our state standards are the model for the United States is because they are based on skills. It's not, you have to teach these 10 books or you have to teach these 5 facts, but they're based on skills. So it allows not only for students to know that they're going to have a good experience in each class, but also for those new teachers who come in. Most of us, when we became teachers, it was like, you're teaching these 5 books, good luck. And there wasn't a curriculum, you would just have to make it up all yourself. And also the idea, you're not teaching a book, you are teaching the skills and the beauty. And I'm speaking for the teachers. I'm on behalf of the teachers. The beauty of being a teacher is you do come to my classroom and there's a certain little flavor. And I'm teaching those same skills, but I'm teaching with my favorite poems. Or this year, I might use something that's contemporary because it relates to something else. So we want students to have an equitable education, but we don't want to have the identical education. And sometimes the weird thing that your teacher loves is the thing you remember. So that beautiful balance of making sure that they are taught the skills, but that the teachers have time to collaborate to make sure that they're guaranteeing the basic parts, but that they still get to, have the particular flavor and their passions and their academic freedom in their classrooms. So I'm preaching to the choir, but that's more to help unpack some of the language. And then the vertical integration is to make sure that when you go freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, you're not learning the same thing every year. You're not like, oh, here we go again with the same thing. That you are making sure that certainly there's skills that are iterative and you have to keep working on them, but that you're not bored out of your mind because you're learning the exact same thing every year. So that's.
You should go back to get your license to be a principal and run a school committee. No. I do believe that there's a balance. Great teaching is an art and a science, and we obviously honor that, and we want the creativity to be there, but we also want there to be some moments that are similar in nature. So, but I'm with you. Thank you.
I'm done. Jen, I think I had a question. I think that this is for you. I follow a few of the clubs online. Is there a complete listing of the available clubs for all of the high school and like who to contact if you're interested and when they meet?
Yes. So if you go to the franklinps.net website, there is a club webpage and we update it every year. It lists all the clubs, the mission of that club, who the advisor is, contact information, when they meet, for how long they meet. So that's all there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And Denise, just because you brought it up and Jen sitting here, she deserves a tremendous amount of credit. She took on the managing of clubs from how much it costs to participate to all of the advisorships and all of the expectations to create and our club fair this past year was fantastic. Jen has led that. She's made adjustments. She's done really good work with a whole bunch of human beings that are trying to do the right thing and they need to be organized in a supportive way. And Jen's done tremendous work with that. So thank you.
Thank you. I second that.
Yeah.
Awesome job.
I really enjoy following them and they do such a wonderful job. So thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You had one more?
Please. Yes.
I knew, because that's why it's good for me to go at the end sometimes, because I can think a little bit. Sometimes it takes some time. So I think, thank you for reminding us, or reminding me, Mr. Hanna, about having the department heads take on more of a role in the evaluation process, because it makes so much sense, because they're the content experts. And so I think, in my opinion, securing the advisory period and looping in those department heads into evaluations were big wins in the most recent teacher contract. That's something that we were really pushing for behind the scenes. And I think you said something about just that 10 minutes to smile, to say their name and pronounce their name correctly, make eye contact, and sort of get that read, day after day after day after day, that you can really, as a human to human, notice some differences. And I think that's, Panorama, I'm so excited about. I'm a nerd person, data nerd person also. Having a dashboard of numbers would be really exciting to me. But that one-on-one, face-to-face, eyes-to-eyes, smile-to-smile connection every day is really critical. And it's not just warm and fuzzy. It's the research shows that no real learning happens without connection. Yep. And we know about the kids that don't feel belonging in their school. We know some of the outcomes of things that can happen with kids like that. And we don't want that. We want every kid to have some kind of tether to school. Maybe I don't like this one class, but at this one, she gets me. Or, he asks about my dog every time. And so he's not that bad. So, those little things like that, that's really what makes the community, right? It's the people feelings. So that's so important. And then I think, just to jump either ahead to next week or to what somebody else had said about the culturally responsive and inclusive practice repertoires and skills that were mentioned in the 1C equity action planning piece. How's that going to be captured in the teacher evaluation process? Are those sort of going to be hits on a rubric or part of a conversation? And then I guess, as a follow-up or maybe related is, and this might be to central office actually, are Franklin Public School staff expected to write SMARTY goals, which is the new thing, or are they writing SMART goals? And is that negotiated in the contract? How's that looking, that equity and inclusion piece? So
SMART, it's SMART goals. It's not SMARTY in the contract. However, someone could certainly propose a SMARTY goal if they chose to. And the second part of that question was, can I actually
take my own advice and say what Smarty and Smart is?
Sure.
Smarty is not the candy that I buy because I won't eat it on Halloween. That's a different type of Smarty. This type of Smarty is S for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, or time-based. Is that the T? Mm-hmm. That's SMART goals that all teachers and educators are writing, right? And so SMARTY is those same SMART plus inclusive and equitable. And so that's sort of a newer tide that's coming in some places. Sorry.
Right. So we continue the first thing we have been trying to do is trying to build out our teachers' understanding of what these terms mean. We've heard it mentioned a few times. We hope to hit on some of this next week. So I don't want to steal the thunder of that presentation. However, for example, our elementary teachers participated in the K-5 elementary teachers participated in the anti-bias building blocks, for example. So starting to build people's knowledge base and understanding hopefully leads to a future where we develop those goals and have more explicit goals around there. But ultimately what we are trying to do is build a lens as well. So not just a specific goal someone could have, but trying to develop a lens around how do we look at data? What pieces of information are we looking for? And trying to build that in any goal we have. And that goes back to what we have done the last few years is how does that work? How does the lens of equity how is that seen in all different aspects of what we do? Everything from how we register students, how their first interaction as a family when they enter the district is if they don't speak language, how are we accessing that? And then if we think about students from a teacher perspective, how are we setting up goals that are designed to allow all kids to rise? So maybe not just one population or just saying, I hope that 50% of my students meet the goal. I'm not worried about the other 50. We've tried to really look at how do we set goals where growth across the board is the goal for each kid, and it might look a little different. So those are just some examples I give off in this question, but certainly I think as we move forward and we continue to grow as a district and evolve, these types of practices will start to manifest themselves in different ways.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's sort of that like absorbing the information and being exposed to the information, and you know, a lot of educators will choose to incorporate these things in their practice. And I guess I was wondering, and it's not really an answer. It's not really, I'm not really asking for an answer, I guess, but just like as we're looking forward and as we're talking about building inclusive practices in the district and talking about equity more, you know, like down the line at some point, like how is this going to come out in evaluations? Because some educators are going to do it more than others. And, you know, if we're really looking at like as a district, this is what we're expecting as a district, this is like what we value and where we want to be, then at some point,
right,
we should be evaluating.
So when we talk about understanding, you know, thinking about how we structure lessons so that all kids can access that information right off the bat.
Mhm.
You know, we talked a little bit about UDL earlier, but certainly like that's like the first stage. When we had our keynote, that was one thing that was mentioned, was really around how do we design instruction that allows each kid to come in, and we've removed those barriers and every kid can come in and learn. So the first tier in that is engagement. So how are we creating relevant experiences for kids? I talked a little bit about this last meeting, but certainly that would be an area for me that you might see continued work that actually drills down into a teacher level. How are we designing lessons that allow and account for all kids as they enter the room?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do evaluate teachers on teaching all students. That's the second element to the teacher rubric, is all about that. So has been done, will continue to be done. Any types of evidence can be shared of like, how are we inclusive? How do we support all of our students? What are we doing when students are in one of the three places, either ready to move on, right at the right spot, or need a little bit more support? So that's ongoing and has been for a long time and will continue to be, just as a point of reference. Can we highlight it and maybe have it as a school improvement goal to even refine that practice more down the road? Yeah, for sure. But again, in the writing of this curriculum, there is specific SEL and DEI skills that we are asking to be highlighted. So we know that there are windows and mirrors in our experiences, so students can see themselves and others and learn about themselves and others throughout this, which I think is true inclusivity. And true equity is like, how are we assessing students? How are we creating opportunities for them to show their understanding in multiple spots? And that's all a part of that second standard of the teacher rubric, just as a addition to that.
Awesome. Thank you. And the one other thing that popped in my head, that model unit was so impressive. I clicked on it because I'll click on any link. And I was like, oh, am I supposed to have access to this? And it's like, oh, wow. It has all the 5 competencies tied in, the portraits of God. It's like all there in one little package. It was really, really impressive. Awesome. Nice job. And I can't wait to see hundreds of them. I guess. There'll be a lot of links to click. Okay. I love it. Thank you.
Well, with Denise looking at all the clubs and you looking.
I know.
Thank you, everyone, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jagir, discussion action items.
Yes, I'll just go right down the list, and I want to just thank once again our middle school and high school administrators for presenting, being here, fielding the questions, and just really bringing the work to light and the detail you added. So thank you. Okay. I recommend approval of the middle school improvement plans as presented.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the middle school improvement plans as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, questions? Okay, roll call vote on the motion. Camille?
Yes.
Dave Callahan?
Yes.
Al Charles?
Yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Elise Stokes?
Yes.
Megan Whitmore?
Yes.
Denise Spencer, yes. All right, motion carries.
I recommend approval of the high school improvement plan as presented.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the high school improvement plan as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, questions? All right, roll call on the motion. Camille Bernstein?
Yes.
Dave Callahan?
Yes.
Al Charles?
Yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Elise Stokes?
Yes.
Megan Whitmore?
Yes.
Denise Spencer, yes. All right, motion carries.
Thank you. I recommend moving policy JICH, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use by students to second reading as discussed.
Is there a motion to move policy JICH to a second reading as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, questions?
I just have a question, a quick one. Has the substance abuse task force looked at this, or representatives? Just input from them, I guess.
I would say
That you,
I have, and Mrs. Morano has looked at this as well.
Okay.
One thing I would point out is we tried to look for consistency. You may recall last meeting, we had our tobacco use on school policy that came forward, and it talked about some of the descriptions, and we saw an opportunity to review this while it was part of our discussions more recently to make sure that it included some of the same types of information and examples and make it consistent so that there was some alignment on that work. Those are the big changes.
Awesome. Thanks.
Right. All right. Roll call will come on the motion. Camille?
Yes.
Jay Callahan?
Yes.
Al Charles?
Yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Elise Stokes?
Yes.
Megan Whitmore?
Yes.
Denise Spencer, yes. All right, motion carries. All right.
I recommend approval of the following resolutions.
Okay. Well, we have to go through each one.
Okay.
All right. So, resolution 1 regarding sanctuary laws for transgender students, sponsored by the Lexington School Committee and co-sponsored by the Worcester, Somerville, Grafton, and Franklin School Committees. Whereas the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a long history of standing for civil rights, including advocacy for a Bill of Rights and the United States Constitution, and whereas Massachusetts codified gender identity as a protected class in the 2011 Act relative to gender identity, and whereas all children deserve a safe environment in which to grow up, and whereas some state governments are now criminalizing supportive medical care for trans individuals, moving to bar families from traveling to access such care, and otherwise violating the civil rights of trans children and their families. And whereas the defense of the civil rights of the historically marginalized is contained within the first article of the Massachusetts Constitution right of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls on the Great and General Court to join with other states in the passage of so-called sanctuary laws to ensure such children and their families have the power of enjoying in safety and tranquility their natural rights and the blessings of life as guaranteed by the Constitution of the Commonwealth. Rationale, the 2011 passage of the Act relative to gender identity marked a Massachusetts commitment to the civil rights of transgender residents. Laws recently passed or being considered in other states would put into question this protection, as some such laws call for families to be prosecuted for seeking medical treatment for their children, even across state lines. This is a profound violation of the civil rights of these children, and it increases the potential harm both to them and to their families. In response, a number of states are considering so-called sanctuary laws, which would shield families from such prosecution and extend to those children the rights guaranteed to them by Massachusetts law. As of the passage of this resolution, no such bills have been filed in Massachusetts. The legislature must back up the 2011 Act with this further protection. Does anyone have any questions on this? Nope.
I wonder if just talking about resolutions in general, are these the first resolutions that have come before this committee like this?
No, we did it last year.
No, I think
that was the previous
Yeah.
term.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I'm just sort of like why we vote and then what happens.
Okay. So MASC, every year they have an annual delegation, representatives from each school committee from every district in Massachusetts. They help set the priorities for the next year for MASC. So what they want to advocate at a state level. So each year they bring forth resolutions for everyone to vote on. If there's any amendments that you wanted to make, if you have any questions, I go back to the chairs of, for example, this one was sponsored by Lexington. So I would go back to Lexington, ask them your questions, and then at the next meeting, I'd bring some answers back. And then on November 2nd, I'll be spending the day down in Hyannis with 300 other people voting and discussing these resolutions on the Franklin School Committee's behalf. Okay. So if there's nothing on resolution 1, I'll go to resolution 2. Okay. Resolution 2, to increase the maximum balance allowed by the Special Education Reserve Fund, sponsored by the Plimpton School Committee. Whereas the Municipal Modernization Act allows for municipalities in conjunction with their school districts to create a special education reserve fund to cover the cost of unanticipated or unbudgeted special education costs, including the cost of out-of-district placements and special education transportation. And whereas the current language of the Special Education Reserve Fund caps the balance at 2% of annual net school spending, which for many rural and small districts does not leave enough in reserves to meet the needs of a single student who is placed into a collaborative setting. Never mind a student who may be medically fragile and in need of an intensive residential placement. And whereas school districts with large student bodies are more likely to experience multiple unanticipated and unbudgeted special education-related expenses throughout the school year. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls upon the Massachusetts legislature to amend Chapter 40, Section 13E by deleting 2% of the annual net school spending and by inserting the following 5% of the annual net school spending. Rationale: current prices for special education day programs in Massachusetts collaboratives can cost a district between $50,000 to $70,000 per student, and private provider day programs can cost districts between $70,000 to $100,000 per student. These prices do not include the cost to transport the students to these separate settings, which is part of the overall price and can fluctuate in cost. Private residential special education settings can cost a district between $120,000 to $250,000 per student. The 5% cap would allow for deeper investment of the municipality's own monies towards preventing mid-year budget crises and positioning the school district to have the ability to provide an appropriate public education in the least restrictive setting to all students. The 5% cap would also allow reserves to grow to a sustainable level, which hopefully would not be wiped out by a single year of special education-related expenses. Any questions or concerns on this one? Dave?
Just one kind of clarifying question, just to kind of make sure I'm understanding it, is that this resolution, it's not kind of asking any district to be investing any more money into it. It just allows us to invest at a higher level to kind of prevent some budgetary issues later on down the line. Is that correct?
So currently the law allows for a I'm going to call it a sped stabilization account. And in Franklin, we do not have such an account. Currently the law allows us to set aside 2% of our net school spending, which I want to say is roughly $70 million, in such a the stabilization account. Sorry. So this law would change that 2% to 5%.
But then we're under no, so this goes and passes and goes through the legislator. We're under no obligation to change our existing policy, but it does allow, if we wanted to kind of pursue that route, it just adds a deeper well of investment that we can kind of have. Is that correct?
It would also, allow other districts as well. This isn't just for like us. It's also, we're advocating for other districts.
Absolutely. I'm just kind of looking back at us, more just kind of being mindful. Sometimes there's always things like that bounce back effect that, I'm going to kind of bring up later on down the road. But this is just beneficial to us and to everyone else without any obligation coming back to us. And that's more, I just wanted to confirm. So thank you very much.
All right. Resolution number 3, membership of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, submitted by the Arlington School Committee. Whereas the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education has broad powers to set education policy and enact regulations for Massachusetts public schools, and whereas the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education has the power to choose a receiver to replace an elected school committee, and whereas the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education governs educator licensure in Massachusetts, and whereas practicing educators and school committee members are prohibited from serving on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, and whereas the teaching profession is the only profession or trade in Massachusetts where the holders of a license are prohibited from serving on its governing board, and whereas professional expertise and a commitment to public governance should not disqualify a person from serving in a leadership role. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls for the enactment of legislation to repeal the provision of Massachusetts law that prohibits practicing educators and sitting school committee members from serving on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Be it further resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls for legislation to reconstitute the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education by including members with expertise as licensed educators and members with expertise in public school governance. Any questions? Okay. Megan, just yell out if you have questions or comments.
So I do.
Will do.
Okay. Yes.
So right now, the folks that are on this board are not active educators. They're either
Correct.
retired or they're not part of the. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Not even that. All right. Resolution number 4, preserving local governance of Massachusetts schools, sponsored by the Arlington School Committee. Whereas the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has exercised its power to take over school districts in Lawrence in 2011, Holyoke in 2015, and Southbridge in 2016. And whereas the placement of the public schools of Lawrence, Holyoke, and Southbridge in receivership has removed their respective school committees from their role as the governing board for their schools and has replaced local governance with a state receiver. And whereas a Boston Globe analysis of test scores, graduation rates, college enrollment, and a dozen other metrics in Lawrence, Holyoke, and Southbridge shows state receivers have failed to meet almost all of its stated goals for the districts. And whereas the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has no plan, strategy, or timeline for restoring local governance and accountability to the voters of Lawrence, Holyoke, and Southbridge. And whereas the Massachusetts Association of School Committees asserts that a strong system of local governance and accountability is the foundation of excellent schools, therefore be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to restore local governance and accountability for the Lawrence, Holyoke, and Southbridge Public Schools no later than July 1st, 2023, and be it further resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls on the Massachusetts Legislature to enact legislation to limit any future state takeovers to a term of no more than 3 years. Any questions?
This is just so interesting because there was one that we had not long ago about school committees and receivership that must have not passed.
No.
So now they're
It didn't-
trying
yeah,
again.
they're trying
And now they're listing specific
districts.
Whereas before they were basically saying
Any.
district. Okay.
Now they're specifically stating, listing Lawrence, Holyoke, Southbridge.
Okay.
So, go ahead. So we're stating those districts, but then we're also stating that if it does happen, there is guidance
There
around.
should be.
There is a term limit that this has to happen.
Yeah.
Or it has to be released.
Some
And
kind of end
It's not
date.
indefinite. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of voting, do we vote yay or nay for all of them, or do we vote individually for each one of these?
We can vote yay or nay for each one.
Okay, thank you.
And so also with this one too, just so I'm kind of clear, essentially when I started reading it, it's sponsored by the Arlington School Committee and they're not affected whatsoever. But the other ones, Lawrence, Holyoke, Southbridge, they can't be sponsors because of the state receivership, that they don't even have school committees that could be voting members and write this resolution. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, sorry, another question.
Yeah.
In terms of modifications to this, I guess what voice do we have? Like, is it like, can we provide recommendations on changes to this?
Yes.
Or is it just?
So on November 2nd, when I go,
Yep.
they ask if anyone has any amendments that they would like to propose. So if you were to make a proposed change tonight,
Mhm.
I would, and if everyone voted on it, if it passed, I would bring it to the November 2nd meeting. And then the larger committee would vote on it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Resolution 5. Only have 2 more.
Sometimes you always volunteer to read out loud.
No, I know. Nope, not even a little. Resolution.
One that counted out, be like, oh, what do I have to read?
I was the one,
Some practice
you would
next
lose.
time.
Yeah. I was the one who was talking in the corner. Resolution 5, personal financial literacy education, sponsored by the Framingham School Committee. Whereas students will need to make wise financial decisions to promote financial well-being throughout their lives, and whereas students will need to develop actionable strategies to manage their futures, including managing their budgets by developing savings plans, navigating credit and debt, and creating a blueprint for financing higher education or their careers. And whereas students will need to be informed consumers when making everyday purchases for both small and large items. And whereas with guidance and financial literacy, students have increased chances of affording and attaining a college education. And whereas without prior long-term financial planning, higher education plans do not come to fruition for many students due to extraordinary tuition rates. And whereas college tuitions and other financial choices, such as credit card debt and loans, can saddle students with a lifetime of debt due to their inability to pay back student and other type of loans. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC file legislation that would have the effect of ensuring that all students have exposure to personal financial literacy curricula and ultimately graduate from high school with the lifelong knowledge of how to be fiscally responsible to avoid being deterred by financial woes. This legislation would ensure that the students at various levels would benefit from curriculum in Massachusetts public schools, which would include content in personal financial literacy. Rationale: because many students and their families today do not plan far enough ahead for college tuition, many students are not able to attend institutions of higher learning or need to drop out due to inadequate funds. This resolution will help to ensure that students are knowledgeable about the best options available to them in order to be fiscally responsible and receive the best advice in attaining their goals by being educated about the best options for paying tuitions, use of credit cards, securing personal loans, including car loans, etc. Any questions, comments on 5, Dave?
So I know I spoke about this earlier at the high school presentation. Obviously this is one of those resolutions that could, if, passed by the state, kind of come back to us, and all of a sudden, we're on the hook monetarily to finance a curricula like this. However, I think this is something that's incredibly important to every American, but especially to young students. And I think it would be something fantastic. And I love that we already kind of have something like that in development at the high school level. And kind of really, regardless of where this resolution falls, I would love to see us, kind of start to poke around in that a little bit as well.
This is beyond if this becomes required or not. It's a direction we want to move, and the power of compound interest, both negatively and positively for students. If I knew that one concept leaving high school, I think of all the Marines of Camp Lejeune who bought the Mustangs and all the cars at 23% interest, like your coworker. I think it would have saved a lot of people a lot of trouble. So, and we do offer financial, personal finance as an elective, but this speaks more to all kids. And I think our goal is to have kids who leave with those portrait of a grad skills, which are the ability to meet this need. So regardless of how this shakes out, I know Mr. Hanna, I know our middle school folks, we're going to look for opportunities to continue. And even with elementary, we've done work with banks around savings and continuing that. So yes.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And then to the chair, if we do have like a suggestion or amendment, would we do that now or wait until finally kind of suggestion, the rationale, like the whole first sentence is just nothing but negativity. The students and families are
dummies.
Dumb.
Yeah. It's
not helpful. And it's also, as we kind of talk about that, we want to do this in Franklin because of the benefits, not because every student and their family can't plan ahead, but because it's great advice. That financial literacy, done at the elementary school level, that compound interest is, just fantastic by the time they graduate seniors. So if I could make an amendment, would just be to kind of strike that first line.
And then just start it with this resolution will help.
Ensure students, yeah. So this resolution will just be beneficial.
Yep.
For no other reason to be beneficial.
Okay. I guess my question is, does the et cetera stand for enough? I feel like there should be a little phrase, because what if it's like cryptocurrency? What if it's like things that we don't even know? I just feel like the et cetera is a little too vague there, and just something. I don't want to add any other things, just some general comment about and others as determined by current fiscal landscape or something like that. Because, I guess if we're considering taking out the first, I just don't like that it's just college, because it could be trade school, it could be further training. It's just, it's a little too
Narrow.
Niche.
Financial strategies.
So, and other such financial decisions that may affect their quality of life, something like that.
And other such, what?
I don't even know if that's good because of the earlier question.
Well, so what about so it reads, this resolution will help to ensure that students are knowledgeable about the best options available to them in order to be fiscally responsible. Period?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just strike the rest of it?
Yeah.
All right. I can suggest that. It doesn't mean that it will get.
Well, we'll see how persuasive you are.
Listen, my school committee members said that it was dumb. So
We wanted it smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more inclusive and equitable the way we did it.
So yeah, I agree with the whole idea of this, but I think some of the wording throughout is it's like a little vague or too flowery, like avoid being deterred by financial woes. Is that the best way to put it? You know what I mean? Like,
it's very focused on college. It's college. I would like to see it more generalized.
Just talking about
quality
growing
of
up and being
life.
an adult, you're going to need to deal with money. And so, right, it's very focused on college.
Okay.
So
I mean, even their second whereas covers a lot of it. And
yeah. Like the first 1, 2, 3 whereases are great. And then it fits into the college, the tuition.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just to kind of strike those other whereas.
I think it's written by a parent. It's like paying off.
I know.
Which I get. Like very often our personal things inspire us, but it's not inclusive.
Right.
Can you stop talking about it?
Here's some players. Okay, so you want me to strike those last 3 whereases in the therefore be it resolved with MASC file legislation. You want me to get rid of?
I like the therefore be it resolved paragraph.
You like woes? The word woes? It's okay if you do.
Okay, I think you need to say a little bit of the scary part, but the focus should be on, we're so close.
I do have financial woes.
I do like the last whereas though. College tuitions and other financial choices such as credit card debt and loans can saddle students with a lifetime of debt due to their inability. Like that's
to
not
pay
untrue.
them back. How about pay them back instead of getting specific again about the loans?
So get rid of the student and other
pay them back.
Or just to pay back.
To pay back
their loans. Oh my God, we're just rewriting this whole thing to pay back their loans. Okay. Okay. So
You're going to be making all sorts of friends with the friend.
everyone's going.
I know. Right?
All right. So the 4th and 5th whereases we're striking. The 5th one, ending it with to pay back their loans. Rationale, delete first sentence and etc. Okay. All right. Anything else?
No.
So then we vote, when we vote, we don't vote nay on this, we vote yay or nay on that, the modified?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Al wants to say.
He does.
Not on this one. I want to circle back, but I figured I'd let you all finish up.
All right, what?
First. I'm having heartburn on resolution 4. The last be it further. resolved. So this makes sense that we limit the timeframe for control by the state. However, not all problems can be resolved in 3 years. I feel like this needs something to state that as long as it's limited to 3 years or like no improvement has happened. Like if they're making progress and it's going to take them 5 years to do so, they should have control for the 5 years. And as long as we're seeing the progress being made, it makes sense, but not giving them control indefinitely and not having a plan. Because that's what the problem is here, is we're saying that there is no plan in sight. They have not seen any progress on the goals, and that's the problem, not that the time frame. If they
we say they have to do SMART goals in order to,
but
take over.
But I mean, if it's something that's going to take more than 3 years, we can't say you have 3 years and you're 2/3 through the process, and now you have to give control, and all that work now goes backwards. Like I feel like it's not just time bound. It's also action has to be, or no action has to be shown within that time frame to then release it back to the school committee.
Okay. I think initially they wanted no receivership at all. So now they're saying like, fine, we'll give you 3 years, but it hasn't been proven to work.
Yeah.
So why even do it in the first place? I think is what they're.
But I'm saying if we say that it requires time and showing of growth, then it forces the state to enact and actually move forward. Unless, or give it back. It's use it or lose it in essence.
Right. So you're saying for 5 years?
No, I'm just saying it's combined with time, and we have to see some level of, or
lack of progress.
Exactly. Because it's shown that they're ill-equipped to control it. So now let's give it back to a new school committee to then right the ship.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So would you just add at the end of that, the last of no more than 3 years with no progress?
Yeah, no progress to
Documented
goal.
progress.
Exactly. Something
Okay.
along those lines,
Yeah.
just to kind of tie the two.
Yeah.
Because once again, if it takes them 4 years and they've made a ton of progress, do we now just say, well, it's 3 years and you're
right. Your time's up.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right. So if they're making progress, they could have longer.
Exactly.
Yeah. How about a review after 3 years to assess progress?
Yeah, I would say something just to kind of tie it back to progress. That's really,
Because I just don't want it to be like, well, we made this little progress, so we get to keep you under our thumb.
But I think if there's, once again, it comes down to how much work needs to be done. I wouldn't want to go backwards.
Raising your hand at this meeting the whole time.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Just my perspective.
They're gonna be like, well, there's that Denise woman again.
Drinking.
Okay, you asked to go to this meeting.
I didn't.
She got voted.
Resolution 6, establishment of a regional school assessment reserve fund sponsored by the Silver Lake Regional School Committee. Whereas regional school committees of the Commonwealth are tasked with producing financially sound budgets designed to meet the needs of all their students, just like all public school committees of Massachusetts. And whereas municipalities or regional schools are presented with regional assessments, which can fluctuate dramatically based on enrollment percentage changes and can be further exacerbated by unbalanced adjustments of the equalized valuation of property, a key metric in the state's formula used to calculate the minimum required local contribution. And whereas in 2016, the state of Massachusetts passed the Municipal Modernization Act, which aimed to grant more local control and encouraged financial efficiencies where possible, the precedent exists in statute to support the creation of a regional schools assessment reserve fund, which could be used to offset abnormally large increases to a municipality's regional assessment. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls upon the Massachusetts legislature to enact or amend legislation which permits municipalities to establish a regional school assessment reserve fund. Proposed language for legislation could include to amend Mass General Law Part 1, Title V11, Chapter 40 by inserting Section 13F as follows. Chapter 40, Section 13F, Regional School Assessment Reserve Fund for payments towards future regional assessments. Any municipality which accepts this section by a majority vote of the municipality's legislative body may establish and appropriate or transfer money to a reserve fund to be utilized in the upcoming fiscal years to pay for the regional assessment in years when the regional assessment increases by more than 35% over the previous year's regional assessment. The balance in the reserve fund shall not exceed 10% of the annual regional assessment for the municipality. Funds shall only be distributed by the reserve funds after a majority vote of the municipality's legislative body in years when the regional assessment is more than 3.5% in order to bring the regional assessment down to no less than 2.5% increase. The municipal treasurer may invest the monies in the manner authorized in Section 54 of Chapter 44, and any interest earned thereon shall be credited to and become part of the fund. Does anyone have anything they would like to change about that?
No, I have a comment. I kind of understood it. I'm glad we're not regionalized.
Yeah.
So we're all okay with that one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so. Resolution 1, Camille.
Yes.
Dave Callahan.
Yes.
Wait, did we have a motion?
Is there a motion to approve the following resolutions as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call vote, resolution 1.
Yes.
Camille, Dave,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Elise.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
All right, Denise, yes. All right, resolution 2, Camille.
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
I'm yes. Resolution 3, Camille,
Heck yeah.
Dave Callahan, Al Charles.
Yes.
Dave McNeil.
Yes.
Elise.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Denise, yes. Resolution 4, Camille.
Yes.
All right, so resolution 4.
We
was
didn't
the-
change
We didn't change anything. Yep, all right.
Oh,
Yes, we
well,
did.
we were.
Oh, no, we
have
did.
the-
Yes.
Yeah.
So
With no progress.
Yep, with the no progress. And just so you guys know, there's forms that I have to fill out and submit beforehand.
You're welcome.
So I will put these together and send them to you. And then you guys can review it. And if you have any questions or comments or any additions, reply just back to me and we'll take care of it.
Thank you.
4,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Al,
Just to confirm, as amended.
as amended, correct?
Yes.
Dave Neal,
Yes.
Elise.
Yeah.
Megan Whitmore.
Yes.
Denise, yes. Resolution 5 as amended.
Yes.
All right, Camille, yes. Dave Callahan.
Yes.
Al Charles.
Yes.
Dave McNeil.
Yes.
Elise.
Yes.
Megan Whitmore.
Yes.
Denise Spencer, yes. All right, number 6, Camille.
Yes.
Dave Callahan.
Yes.
Al Charles.
Yes.
Dave McNeil.
Yes.
Elise Stokes.
Yes.
Megan Whitmore.
Yes.
All right, Denise, yes. All right, motion carries.
All right.
Mr. Jagir, E, please.
So this is about the establishment of the redistricting analysis subcommittee. As previously discussed, the space needs facility assessment subcommittee reviewed the facilities throughout the district during the 2022-23 school year. And on June 9th, you may recall, the findings were presented to the school committee with recommendations. There were 3 recommendations during that meeting. One was to conduct a redistricting analysis. The second was to secure a consultant to assist with the process. And the third was to form a redistricting advisory committee composed of community stakeholders. During the September 27th meeting, our last meeting, the recommendation to contract with the redistricting consultant Applied Geographics, AppGeo, was voted by the school committee and was approved. In accordance with school committee policy BDF, I propose that the school committee establish a redistricting advisory committee to suggest the following framework. The purpose of the redistricting committee will be to participate in a redistricting analysis of Franklin Public Schools in collaboration with AppGeo's redistricting consultant. They will provide input, meaning the advisory committee will provide input, feedback, and local context on proposed scenarios to potential updates to attendance boundaries within Franklin. The Space Needs Subcommittee will present findings and possible recommendations to the school committee for consideration and changes to school boundaries. The final decision regarding redistricting rests with the Franklin School Committee. Composition, it's proposed that the school committee have 2 chairs to guide the work, 1 school committee member and the superintendent or designee. And the school committee will make appointments to the advisory committee consistent with the school committee policy BDF. We will seek stakeholder representation from across the district, including members of the school committee, superintendent, district administration, school principals, FEA, leadership, teachers, staff representation, parents and guardians, and community members. Those interested in serving on the redistricting advisory committee will have the opportunity to apply via an interest form, which will be emailed. Communication will be forthcoming with details if this is approved. And the time commitment, we met with Applied Geographics this morning as an introductory and initial meeting, and they discussed having basically 2 groups, one smaller working group that can provide information like our map data, our GIS data, not map, student data, demographic information, boundaries, a host of other pieces of information they need to put together, basically considerations, but ultimately have a large group that I just mentioned that would meet multiple times per year. They suggested 4, potentially 5, meeting each month. Their first meeting is a kickoff with the full committee, and then have some in-between work for basically folks to dive into some of the details and ultimately arrive by the end of the school year with scenarios and a recommendation. There'll also be components to their project where the community is engaged at large, even if you're not participating on the committee. And we talked about the communication strategy involved, which includes a website which has up-to-date information, multiple opportunities to present to school committee an update on what's happening. So overall, it seemed like there was a very comprehensive plan that they've put together. But ultimately, folks, when they receive if you approve, they'd receive the interest form, which would outline the commitment, so people would know upfront what they would be signing up for. So with that said, I recommend the establishment of the redistricting advisory committee to the school committee as discussed.
All right. Is there a motion to establish a redistricting advisory committee as discussed? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion, questions, Camille? No. Dave?
Yeah, just 2 things. One, love just seeing the stakeholders, all, specifically kind of listed out. I appreciate that. And then within the purpose too, talk about like the scope of just the updates to attendance boundaries. So is the scope, I would say limited to, that's a lot, but is this scope just about redrawing boundaries, or is it also kind of potentially taking a look at it like a realignment about how we utilize the existing space that we have? Like, are we going to, just kind of say, all right, these are the buildings that we have, let's just kind of draw new lines on the map? Or are we going to take a look at the full scope and say, all right, here's the utilization that we have, how best to utilize all of this based on enrollment numbers?
So after meeting today, I feel more confident in answering. It's really to look at the information and come into this without any preconceived decisions on what needs to happen, but walk through a process that actually considers that information and engages a larger group in discussion. What I liked is they emphasized that local context and making sure they understood. They provided some examples that they learned through the community on things you don't find on a map that are important to know and unique to a specific area. Like, oh, I walked through, there's a trail, that leads right to a whole neighborhood that can connect right to a school, is one example that they gave that you wouldn't necessarily know. So I think it's a great mix of engaging humans that are representative of our schools with information and then tying the 2 together. And I don't think we're limited in that, except that the idea is you're really trying the goal of this is to look at how are we assessing, which is something we haven't really done in about 20 years. How are we assessing our schools currently and then for the future with their enrollment, and what makes the most sense for who should attend what based on where you live within the town, which is the scope of any redistricting. So that would be my answer.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Al?
No questions.
Okay. Dave?
No questions.
All right. Elise?
No, awesome.
Megan?
No questions.
Okay. All right. Vote will come on the motion. Camille?
Yes.
Dave Callahan?
Yes.
Al Charles?
Yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Elise Stokes?
Yes.
Megan Whitmore?
Yes.
Denise Spencer, yes. All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Discussion only items. There are none. Okay, information matters. Superintendent evaluation.
No updates on that. Yep.
Budget. David Neal.
Budget is not met.
Okay, policy.
We had a great meeting a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, we had a second read of one of our policies. We also kind of talked about, actually, we had two robust conversations. One was about utilizing Venmo within student activities and for student utilization. And, at the end of the day, we opted not to kind of proceed in that direction. Kind of moving forward, Mira, please, feel free to correct me if anything I'm overstating. But ultimately, there was just too many, both logistical and also financial hurdles to kind of pulling in Venmo, just for things like, say, like homecoming tickets or the banquet that was kind of discussed earlier today. It would really put a strain financially, on the district, along with actually the staff as well. There are options. Union Bank is kind of working with a place like Venmo, actually with Venmo, to be able to kind of pull them in. But at this moment, we did kind of look into that possibility, and it's just not something that kind of came out of policy as a recommendation. But we also kind of we started a discussion about strengthening the policy of life-threatening food allergies. And that's something that, like I said, we had an initial conversation. We're going to meet again on November 9th. And at that point, I think we should have a lot of feedback from principals, staff members, about, how we could really kind of just reinforce our existing policy and just make it just safer for our kiddos. But then otherwise, like I said, the next meeting is on November 9th.
Okay. Space needs facilities.
So we haven't had a meeting, but as Mr. Jagir had mentioned, we did meet with Aptio today informally just to get aligned. So from a process standpoint, the contract should be completed and signed by the end of this week. And then now that we do have the approval for the redistricting advisory committee, Mr. Jagir will be able to send out some communications out to solicit interest, and we'll look to do it through various means so that folks of all groups can be aware and share their interest. No new meetings as of yet, so more to come.
Joint PCC.
I misspoke last month or last meeting. Our next JPCC meeting is this coming Monday, the 17th.
All right. Perfect. School Wellness Advisory Council.
SWAC met on October 4th to review last year's accomplishments, evaluate end of the year feedback, and discuss areas of focus for this year. Our second year working with the wellness coach will be focused on putting policy into practice. Our coach will be attending the next meeting on November 1st. Anything else to add?
CPAC?
CPAC. So the Meet the CPAC event is tomorrow night on Zoom. And the book club meeting is November 18th in person at Escape to Fiction, or people can join on Zoom. Again, that discussion will be focused on Temple Grandin's book, Thinking in Pictures, and everyone is welcome to attend. They're still hoping to host a trunk or treat, but stay tuned. Stay tuned for a date on that, and check out their Facebook page for more information.
Thank you. Substance Abuse Task Force.
We had our first meeting today at the Safe Coalition's new headquarters here in Franklin and Mosley Mills. Such a great space. It's huge, and there's just lots of meeting spaces, and they're going to have activities for families and students, and it's going to be awesome. So it's great to continue to partner with the Safe Coalition. So we had a great discussion about our what we started planning last year, but also our next critical conversations, which will probably be in January. We kind of have different components of it. We're going to have a student panel and really listen to student voice on what they want to hear and what they're experiencing. Also adding a parent component, as well as some educational components. So we're really excited about the work, and our next meeting is November 15th.
Okay. And DEI committee.
We are going to be kicking that off. It's actually great timing with our next presentation, but then we will have a meeting. It's right before the 25th, so I want to say it might be around the 21st. I have to double check with that on that particular date.
Okay. All right, perfect. Moving along, consent agenda, Mr. Gier.
I recommend approval of the minutes from your September 27th, 2022 school committee meeting as detailed. I recommend acceptance of a check for $225 from the Franklin Music Boosters for in-house enrichment as detailed. I recommend acceptance of a check for $1,100 from the Keller PCC for field trips as detailed.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as detailed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion, questions?
Am I allowed to approve if I left at 8:26?
If you would?
The minutes, like I left.
She left mid-meeting.
I threw up.
Oh, that's right.
Remember? So
yeah.
am I allowed to vote,
Yeah, you
like
can
to
have half
approve
of it.
them? If
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. Roll call vote.
Behind
Camille.
the scenes.
I know, right? That's never happened before.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Well,
Camille.
I wasn't here.
Yeah. Camille.
Yes.
Dave Callahan.
Yes.
Al Charles.
Yes.
Dave McNeil.
Yes.
Lee Stokes.
Yes.
Megan Whitmore.
Yes.
Denise Spencer, yes. All right, motion carries. Moving along. Citizens' comments. All right, hold on. Are there any citizens in the audience, in person or online, who would like to make a comment on an item not on tonight's agenda and falls within the committee's purview? For example, the budget, performance of the superintendent, policies, etc. Oh, I see one. Kyle Thompson, if you could just wait 1 second, I just have to read the blurb. In the spirit of open communication, the committee will hold a public participation segment, also called citizens' comments, about matters not related to an agenda item within the school committee's purview. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and must be addressed to the committee. Citizens' comments segments are not debates or Q&A sessions. It is intended to offer citizens an opportunity to express their opinions on issues of school committee business. The committee will listen to but not respond to any comment made. If you could please state your name, address, and please keep within the 3 minutes. All right, thank you, Kyle. Oh, is he unmuted?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Wait, give me 1 sec here.
Sure.
Okay, got a little. Okay, there we go. I just ate 20 seconds of my time. That was a long meeting, but I appreciate all the effort from everyone in the session today. First, I just want to say I like what Josh Hanna said about looking at other schools and their academic successes and looking to maybe incorporate some of these things into Franklin. And I'd also like to understand if he's looking at just public schools or at charter and private schools as well. I also like what was mentioned near the end of the meeting, and I think in the middle, about teaching kids to be fiscally responsible in regards to, some of the options after high school. So I think that definitely is important. What I'm not entirely excited about is Franklin Public Schools being hyper-focused on race, sexuality, and gender identity. A lot of the social viewpoints that are being kind of brought into the schools. I think that if diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives were learning about different cultures, like Joshua Hanna said earlier, that he experienced with the eating different foods and so forth from different cultures, or if it was about advocating for a holiday for Diwali, then I'm on board. 100%. My concern is that there are social viewpoints being presented to students by faculty and staff that are coming out of professional development or books referenced in school committee meetings, like Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, or the one mentioned earlier. I wrote the name down somewhere, but I can't find it. We keep hearing that in these meetings that folks want to infuse DEI into the classroom and the curriculum coming from a single viewpoint, or it seems like it's coming from a single viewpoint. So what I would just recommend is some of these topics are controversial, right? And I think when we are presenting controversial topics to either faculty or staff, or particularly to students, of course, that we incorporate a variety of viewpoints and, to make sure that our students are exposed to these viewpoints as well. Obviously not meant for all grades, but, at a certain point. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Is there anyone else? I'll give everybody a minute. Seeing none, moving along, new business, Mr. Jagir.
Okay, new business you can expect as part of our continued series on school improvement goals. You'll hear from Heidi Harris and myself and our team regarding the goals related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, really, and the focus on belonging. And we'll hit on that. And then also approving clubs and activities. It was referenced tonight, but we will put the clubs and activities before you as well, so you can review and see which ones are out there and approve. That will be next meeting for new business, but I did make some notes about things that came up along the way. Last year we did civics presentations at the end of the year, so that's something that you can expect again. Also, we will have, typically we have like an MCAS or an assessment presentation that will be coming later in the fall. And I actually thought maybe an edu jargon presentation or something that kind of unpacks some of those acronyms, because I do think it only helps us to make sure we're clear about what we mean when we say, whatever UDL or SEL, just to be clear. And I think that's something that maybe could live later on the website as well, just to help us continue to engage with our community in a way that makes it clear on what we mean and what we don't mean. And we want to make sure we're trying to bring people along on all these ideas. And some of it's instructional, some of it's related to social emotional well-being or mental health, or creating spaces for all where everyone feels like they belong. So I would just say that maybe it behooves us to put something out as well. I don't know when that will be yet, but we're going to get through this next phase.
Okay. All right. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Let's keep it going.
Second.
All right, perfect. Roll call vote. Camille.
Yes.
Dave Callahan.
Yes.
Al Charles.
Yes.
Dave McNeil.
Yes.
Elise Stokes. Yeah. Megan Whitmore.